people have the possibility of reading a bit of your background on the web page, but I really wanted to point out a few things very quickly. Andrea has, I think, a PhD in physics, right?
Yes.
So he was a researcher. He still is a researcher, but maybe of a different kind. And he's quite famous in our area, in Trento, and I would say also in Italy probably, because he does something very peculiar, which is scientific theater. Can I call it like that, or theatrical science? I don't know. And so this is very intriguing, I think, and a nice way of communicating science to people. I don't know how he's dealing with the pandemic nowadays and all this online stuff. It must be hard to do theater online. But I'm sure today we will have lots of interesting tips and workshops. So thank you, Andrea.
So thank you, and thanks to all the organizers for inviting me here. Yes, the pandemic has made my work quite difficult because I am in actual live theater. I do a lot of live theater as a playwright, as an actor. I organize all kinds of events, but I will be able to tell a little bit more about this in my presentation. So we can get started. Should I start? Is there anything else you
No,
need to
please
say?
do start. Thank
So
you.
wonderful. Let me start by sharing my screen. There we go. Okay. I hope you can all see my screen. And
Yes.
yes, wonderful. And so today, well, welcome everybody. And the first thing I need to tell you is feel free to ask questions and along the way. What I would like this to be is a dialogue, an encounter of, you know, people who actually are working together to understand better how to communicate, how to connect with different stakeholders in all kinds, you know, of situations. I will give you lots of I hope, interesting ideas and you know, my own way of doing these things, of creating stories, of creating engaging you know, situations to talk about science. But of course, I also hope to learn a lot from this experience. Anytime I share my views on these things, I always learn a lot. So I hope it becomes a two-way event. It's going to be uh, um, theoretical at the beginning. So the first in the morning, most of the morning will be you know, more about the tools and the techniques that I use, and then in the afternoon we will devote time to actually do the work and practice with some of these ideas. So you will be actually involved in that. But I will tell you more about it as we move along. So let me see. There we go. So, you know, I'm just going to give you a very brief introduction about things and ideas, and then later I will actually introduce myself a little bit more. But you will see why I wait a little bit, although Michele has already done a great job introducing me. So let's start with this quote by a great physicist, Richard Feynman. And Richard Feynman was a Nobel Prize winner in 1965. Most importantly, he was a great communicator of science, a great teacher. And I think it really connects with everything that we're going to be talking about today. So you will see that today we are going to be talking a lot about how to say a different approach to science communication. I would call it very, very personal. Every one of us should develop their own way. So Richard Feynman said this. He said, I have a friend who's an artist, and he sometimes takes a view which I don't agree with. He will hold up a flower and say, look how beautiful it is. And I will agree. You know, this is what Richard Feynman would say. But then he will say, I as an artist can see how beautiful the flower is, but you as a scientist, you take it all apart and it becomes a dull thing. So I think it's kind of nutty. This is what Feynman would say, you know, because he says there are all kinds of interesting questions that come from a knowledge of science, which only adds to the excitement and mystery of a flower. It only adds. And this, to me, is really at the core of what we're going to be talking about today. Science is absolutely not dry, not cold. It's actually extremely exciting because it opens up ways of looking at the world which are unique, which are surprising, and all we need to do as scientists and also as communicators is to be able to see them, and then of course to be able to describe them. So today we're going to be doing this. We're going to be discovering, and you know, as I said, I'm going to be doing it with you and developing tools of storytelling so that we can connect with the stakeholders in what I hope it's true, emotional, deep way. And of course, we're going to be looking at all kinds of different stakeholders. And for this, I will ask you to help me, because you know much better than I do what are the stakeholders that you need to connect with. So I'm going to take you along a journey, a trip. I want to motivate to you why we're doing this, why we're going to be using storytelling, in which way this storytelling is different from other ways of doing science communication. And then I will give you tools that will help you develop your own ways of doing storytelling. So let's start first from the why. Why do we need that? Well, let's first understand what are the goals of the communication of science. Why do we need to do science communication? And there are some reasons, and here I'm just listing a few of them, and there are many, many more. We could actually devote the whole morning just to talk about this, and actually it would be a great exercise. So, you know, we share the discoveries, of course, and the enthusiasm, and hopefully we can increase the appreciation and the understanding of science, and that's absolutely one reason. Then we connect with decision makers. By communicating science, we connect with them, and hopefully we can influence their choices and decision making. And we have seen that a lot in our during the last year, you know, by communicating science, especially the science that you do. And this is something I really want to underline. There is a lot of misinformation, a lot of fake news running around. So it's really important to be able to communicate properly, to debunk them, and in order also to restore the confidence of the public in what scientists do. And finally, and probably this is the most important one, although it's the further away, it's actually to facilitate the progress and of science. We understand that science is one of the pillars of our society. I believe that there are two real important pillars. One is art and one is science, and they sort of connect a lot, and that's what we are doing today. So these are some of the goals, and in order to achieve these goals, people have used all kinds of tools to communicate them. And here I list a few of them. You see, there are you can open up journals of science communication. You can actually see them in newspapers and all kinds of printed or web situations. You can write books and essays, and in the last 30 years or so, museums of science have come up, and a lot of science festivals have come up. And now with these online movies and online streaming services, a lot of movies and documentaries sort of touch upon science, and especially medical science, and then so on and so forth. There are all kinds of ways of doing it but they all want to achieve what we call science communication. But in fact, if we look at it more closely, communication is not just one straightforward concept. There are three sort of concepts that are really important when we talk about communication. One is the actual communication, but the other one is outreach. And the third one is engagement. And I'd like to give you some definitions about these things. And the reason why I'm doing this is because, let's not forget, I'm trying to motivate to you why storytelling is really important. And I haven't talked about storytelling yet, and I'd like to get to it. But in order to do it, we need to understand what we are storytelling about and why. So when we talk about communication, in fact, the spectrum of communication is a little bit wider. And so we have, of course, the regular communication, which is a process of developing a shared meaning. And I underline the word shared, that forms our experiences. And, so we are sharing our experiences and the relationships. So when we communicate, we sort of create a common image of things, so that then we can talk about the common image. So that's really important. And that's, in my opinion, what communication, how we can actually describe communication in a good and solid way. But then we have another level of what people usually talk about, define communication, which is slightly different. It's called outreach, and we hear a lot of this. This word is used a lot in research institutions, because it's actually one of the key words. You teach, you do research, and then you do a lot of outreach, and outreach, in fact, is an umbrella term for activities that these research institutions do to promote the awareness of science. So it's not to teach science, but to make people aware about what's going on in science. And also, and that's also very, very important, to make informal contributions to science education. So we have communication, we have outreach, and as I said before, they are slightly different, actually not slightly, they're quite different concepts. And then we have the third one, which is engagement. And engagement, actually, from the word itself, it means some sort of push and pull between, between who's actually delivering the engagement practice and the audience and the people, because it's a multi-directional interaction between all kinds of stakeholders, like scientists and the public and politicians and what, because you want to connect with them to generate change, and also to be able to discuss things. So communication is sharing a common meaning. Outreach is to generate awareness, and engagement is to create the opportunity to actually discuss the benefits and the risks of scientific research and technology. So when you look at these three definitions and you sort of distill them, you see that you get some really keywords, some really important keywords here that sort of connect them. Shared meaning, experiences, relationships, awareness, interaction, change. These are all dynamic words. These are words that have to do with our, with the development of our understanding of things. And if you distill all of these words, you see that you can actually achieve these concepts like sharing meaning, experiences, relationships, awareness, and so on, with the narration of stories. So my argument here is that while you have you know, science communication in a standard form like journalism and science museums and all that, if you really want to connect these three pillars of the communication, which is engagement, outreach, and the actual communication, then you can actually do it by using storytelling. Because storytelling is, by definition, the ability to create experiences and generate awareness and make change possible. And so we are going to be doing it. So today I'm going to talk to you about how to generate this by narration of things, and you will see what I mean by that. It can be extremely simple, like, you know, an abstract for an article. It can be hugely complicated, like writing a science novel or a play. After all, we are all storytelling animals. And when I say that, I actually mean that. Our brains developed over, you know, the thousands and thousands of years by the ability to feel empathy. You know, we can imagine our ancestors sitting around the fire somewhere talking, and that's what made our, you know, our that's what gave us the ability to actually visualize things and share experiences without having to live through them, so that we don't get killed every time. You know, we can learn a lot. And if you think this is just a nice poetic way of doing things, actually it's not so. Because research has shown that there are some deep changes in our brain when we witness, when we become part of stories. And so, for instance, if you are able to elicit feelings like empathy or humor or suspense in your brain, there is an increase of hormones that are quite positive. Like, you know, I list some of them here, like dopamine, oxytocin, and endorphin. Now, mind you, I'm not an expert in this, but, you know, I've read a few very, very interesting articles, and there is a TED Talk that I invite you to check out, which is The Magical Science of Storytelling by David J.P. Phillips. And I think it's a really interesting talk, because it actually, he does that. He tells you a story, and he gets you hanging on things. He creates suspense, and then he tells you what happened inside your brain as he was doing it. And I think it's quite an interesting experience. On the other hand, when you generate things like, you know, humor, empathy, and so on, you actually reduce some of the more negative hormones, like adrenaline. And these are really important, because we know that adrenaline is really helpful when you are in danger, but it can be quite toxic when you don't need it. It sort of lowers your ability to memorize things, and makes you take bad decisions. So what I'm telling you here is that the storytelling in any situation is quite an interesting thing, because it connects directly with our brains, and makes us, you know, and sort of allows us to be either deeper or shallower, happier or unhappier. We know that. That's why we go see movies all the time, or we read novels or whatever. So that's good. I hope I convinced you that storytelling, and that's a great way to start a Monday morning. And you know, that's very nice. Thank you very much. I'm sure you're saying, okay, great, but so what? What do we do it? How do we do it? Well, let's start first from understanding what types of storytelling are we talking about. And here is, Michaela said that I am a researcher, and yes, I used to do research in physics. I moved out of that because I wanted to understand how to communicate science better. And my research is really about what are the best ways to create stories. And I see a lot of interesting work being done. And for instance, I see that there are stand-up comedians, like science stand-up comedians. And if you go on YouTube and you look at them, and you search for them, you can find some really good stuff. Typically these are scientists talking to either other scientists or general audiences, and sort of making fun of the whole science situation. And it can be quite effective. But to me, it's not what I mean by storytelling, and certainly it's not what I mean by theater, because theater needs to have some really strong empathetic component. Then there is the show and tell. The show and tell is the kind of storytelling that you see a lot in science museums, when there is an exhibit and there are people sort of telling you things about the exhibit, sort of dressing up like scientists. Oftentimes you will see them with scientific experiments, like mixing powders and having things explode or making bubbles. And to me, that's not theater. It's really useful in some situations. I absolutely reckon that, but it's not theater because also it doesn't have the empathetic component that I'm looking for. Then there is circus. Science circus is actually a thing. There are a lot of people, especially in sciences like physics, that they do juggling and things like that, and they teach you a lot by doing that, and they show you that. But that's also not theater. That's not storytelling. Then there is entertainment and all that. But what theater? And what storytelling? So let me show you an example here, just to break the ice. And now, I'm not expecting you to do this. Also, this is an example from physics, and you work in a different field, but you can apply this in all kinds. Professor Walter Lewin from MIT, he did this as one of his final lectures before he retired. And although it's not storytelling per se, you will see that there is a lot of it in there. But before I do that, I need to stop sharing and then share again so I can share the movie and the audio. So let me do that. And I see there are questions. Okay, so let's keep these questions. Maybe later I will be able to get to them. But let me continue first, and then I will get to your questions. So I'm sharing this again, and now you should be able to hear it.
Here we have a glass plate. You better go out of the way.
Can you hear it?
This is a dangerous experiment.
Yes.
It's a glass one. So if I bring this object exactly at that glass wall, and if I'm clever enough to let it go with 0 speed, it could not break that glass. But if my hands shake a little, and if I give it a little push, then of course it can come back, and it may want to go higher than this, and that would mean I know you guys. Students love it when the glass breaks. That's why they pay such a high tuition at MIT. That's okay, just take that off. Now comes an experiment which is emotionally the most difficult for me of this whole evening. I'm going to put my life on the line to show you that I'm really a believer of the conservation of energy. And you will see how I'm going to do that. I'm going to take the place of the glass. And I'm going to hold this object at my chin. And I cannot move any further back, so there's no cheat here. I'm going to release it right from my chin here. You realize, as you have just seen, that the slightest push, and this will be my last lecture, and no book signing afterwards. So I need your collaboration. When I count down from 3 to 0, no noise, no coughing, and I would even appreciate it if for those 3 seconds you would not even breathe. And I have to tell you something. I couldn't sleep all night. I'm going to close my eyes. I don't want to see it. And I'm going to count down from 3 to 0. 3, 2, 1, 0.
So let me get out of this sharing and get back to the previous one so that I can share again without the optimization for the video. And there we go. So this example of Professor Lewin is an example, in my opinion, of really engaging storytelling. Although, you know, no story was obviously created, but you will see why I'm saying that there are the ingredients in here that are really, really unique of stories, so typical of stories. So there is a problem to overcome. He has to overcome the problem of doing this experiment, hoping that the laws of physics in the universe will not change during the time that he will do it. And he risks his life. He delays, you know, there is a before and an after. There is a transformation that happens along the way. And there is some sort of empathetic connection with the audience. So these are really the typical ingredients of storytelling. And I can assure you that people watching this will never forget this situation, this moment. Because I saw it on YouTube and I also felt that I will never forget it. So it must have been really impactful and deep at the moment. So it's just to show you that you don't need to have, you know, some really fancy creation to be able to actually engage people in what we call storytelling. But just to give you a fuller dimension of the situation, not that I'm asking you to become theater people, but just to give you a better idea about storytelling in its fullest dimension, let's also look at stage theater. And I'm doing this because I think it's important for at least some of you to get a full appreciation of the power of storytelling. So, in fact, I mentioned before circus, you know, show and tell, stand-up comedy, and all kinds of other stuff. But what about stage theater? If you actually are curious about to know more about stage theater that talks about science, there are some really interesting theater plays out there that you might be curious to go and look at. I list a few of them here, and of course I will be more than happy to share them, to share the titles. I am more than happy to share. For instance, Copenhagen by Michael Frayn. It's a great play about two great physicists, Heisenberg and Bohr, during the Second World War. But all of them are really good plays. Arcadia by Tom Stoppard. So these are plays that they use science, but they need science to be able to move forward the story. So at the end of the play, you actually feel that you learned something, that you got excited. They are wonderful outreach tools. All right? So I'm saying this is a direction that I really like. And this is the direction I also try to push my own work. And in fact, let me take a little bit of time just to tell you about my own work. I run a theater company called Ardito Desio. It's a company in Italy. We have a project with the University of Trento called Jet Propulsion Theater. And Jet Propulsion Theater is a project aiming at creating theatrical and stage events for people to be engaged with science. And please make sure you turn off your microphones. I hear some noises coming in. Thank you very much. So this project was started in 2012, and I'm telling you this. Please turn off your microphones. Maybe the webmaster can do it for us. Thank you very much. So I'm telling you this to motivate the reason why I'm here, and maybe to spark your curiosity. And who knows, maybe you are interested in following along this line, and then we can share some ideas. So, for instance, these are some of the plays that we have produced over the years. And mind you, of course, I am a physicist, so we're talking a lot about physics, but not only that. The Principle of Uncertainty was the first one, about quantum mechanics. But for instance, We Robots is about artificial intelligence. Trees Can Dance is a play about the intelligence of forests and of trees, how trees can be intelligent. And then Fly Me to the Moon is about the conquer of the moon, and so on. I would like to share with you this Teatro della Meraviglia. Teatro della Meraviglia is a festival that we run every year now. We have been doing it for the past 5 years, about science communication through stage work, and it will be partly online. And you are more than welcome to go check it out. It's going to be in Italian, but with English subtitles, and some events are also in English, so maybe you can follow them along. And so this is just to generate in you maybe the curiosity to follow along some of these more developed storytelling work that we do. And of course, we are very much involved in European projects, and this is also maybe something that you might be interested in pursuing. We just won a Creative Europe project called Curious. I'll be more than happy to share some of these ideas with you. You're welcome to go and check it out on projectcurious.eu. So this is just to introduce myself. So let's see again what we did so far. I tried to share with you the reason why storytelling is really an interesting tool for communicating to different stakeholders. Then I tried to explain to you what different types of storytelling are out there. And as I said, for me, the real storytelling is the one that generates an empathetic connection with the audience. And I will tell you how I try to do that. And then I try to motivate with you why I'm here talking to you. And that's because it's my work. So far, so good. And today we're going to do this. We're going to explore your ability to write and tell stories. So this is it. And now get ready for the second part of this, of this work that we're going to do together, where I will tell you what tools you're going to be using to do exactly that. But let me first stop for a second. Maybe Michela, I didn't see the chat, but maybe there are questions already that need to be answered.
So basically, the main question I think here is whether you are going to share your slides at the end. So people were wondering whether they should take notes, or I guess that was the reason, or some of these can be, you know, given as notes for them.
I will be more than happy to share the slides at the end. The only request I have is not to share them. I mean, they are personal. Don't put them online or you know, share them further, because you know, they include some of my work. It's so they're. But for you, for the participants today, absolutely yes. I will put them. I will put them on some repository. Maybe Michele, you can tell me where to put them.
I think you can give them to the technical assistants, to Trama, and they will share through the web page, which is only accessed by participants.
Wonderful. So I will generate a PDF file out of the slides and give it to Trama, and so you can have them. No problem. In fact, it's better not to take notes and just to follow along.
Yeah.
Any other questions that you saw that might be important?
I don't know if Virginia is here. I saw that Annemieke had written a comment on the patient disease. I'm not sure I understood what she
was just commenting that's why we try to engage our audience by mentioning first, you know, the personal side of what we do, and we pretty much, not always, but 90% of the time we start with the disease that we're trying to work on. I think she was just
so she commenting on she said that this is why it works well to start with introducing a patient disease. So I think this came when so Annemieke has left because she had another commitment, but right. I think this is happened. So she wrote it when you were telling at the beginning about the different hormones that are elicited or repressed during, you know, listening a story or telling a story. Right. So, you know, on our, you know, in our research, of course, the most emotional part of it is the fact that you try to find a cure for a disease, or you try to to understand what is the disease, why the disease happens, basically.
Right. Okay, so let's move on, and please, Michaela, stop me when you think it's time for a break, because I'm not sure what you planned for.
So breaks. Basically we are now going since 1 hour, and we have 2 more hours, so almost to go. So I don't know if you want to if you think it's okay, we could stop now or in half an hour, whatever.
Let's stop in half an hour. Because right now I want to get started with some of the more technical work. Because right now it was more motivational.
Good.
And of course, again, stop me if you have any questions. I really would like to, you know, to have a conversation. So I'll be more than happy to stop. All right. So now we're going to get into, you know, this idea of how we can create these stories, and what these stories are, and what tools we have. So,
sorry, Andrea, there are 2 questions which just came through the chat. I don't know if you want to. Can you see the chat, or shall I read them?
No, I can see it. I just because I'm sharing the screen. Okay, here I have it. I have the chat right in front of me. Since you're a physicist, how did you develop your knowledge in storytelling? That's a good question. Well, we all know that physicists can do anything, right? No, just kidding. The thing with theater for me has been theater has always been my passion together with science. I've always had this double interest, and so all along, as I was a student of physics at the university, I studied at Cornell University in the United States, and then at Stony Brook University. I also took courses in theater. But in fact, I was studying theater even before that. When I was a high school student, I was already part of a theater company here in Italy. So I've always had this passion. And when I stopped doing theater, when I stopped doing active research in physics, which was 20 years ago, I also enrolled in a theater academy and a 3-year program, and so I graduated from a theater academy as well. So and then I became a professional actor and a professional playwright and director. So I would say that my knowledge in storytelling comes from my training, and also for the last 20 years from my experience in this field. Maybe I missed it, but who is the audience in theater? Lay people or people from the university? No, you didn't miss it. I didn't say it. It's a good question. The audience is really varied in all kinds of situations. You can have schools where you have, as an audience, you have students, maybe even high schools or even younger, depending on what you work on, but also universities, and I've done a lot of work with university theater. But my work is mostly engaging general audiences. So my plays are actually done in all kinds of regular theater seasons. So you might catch, 1 week there is a Shakespeare play, the week after that there is my Principle of Uncertainty. And of course I'm not saying that it's as good as Shakespeare, but we try to make it as good as possible. But one thing that I want to really underline here is that I'm telling you the things I'm going to be sharing, and I'm sharing with you today, is not to make you, to turn you into a theater person or to write plays, but it's really be able for you to generate, to gain an awareness on how you can communicate your science to different stakeholders by using some of the simplest tools of storytelling. So I'm sharing with you my experience in theater just to motivate the fact that I'm here. It's always good to know why somebody is telling you things. But I'm not expecting you to go and write a play. Of course, if you do, it will be great. And in fact, share it with me, because we're always looking for new plays. But yeah, all kinds of audiences. All right. So I think we can continue. So as I was telling you, what you want to do is generate emotion. I always talk about emotions because I think stories are about emotion. And in fact, let's read what this lady wrote. This American writer Maya Angelou wrote. She said, "People will forget what you said, and people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." And I think it's one of the deepest truths that you can pull out, today. Make people feel something. Don't be hesitant. Make them feel something, just like Professor Lewin from the experiment before. But how do we do that? Well, yes, it's not so easy. To make people feel something, whatever you tell them, you need to find connections between what you say and their human experience. And in some sense, I'm doing that right now with you. I'm trying to make an effort to show you that what I'm telling you about today is actually really useful for your work. So I'm trying to make a connection between what I tell you about today and your experience as researchers and as communicators, as teachers. Find connections between your science and the existential dimension of the people who are listening to you. If you are able to do that, then you will generate emotions. How do you find connections, though? Well, there are several ways, but let's look at some possible ideas. People will listen to you if what you tell them has an educational component. In other words, if they feel that they are learning something. People will listen to you if what you tell them brings them back to some other memories they have, to a past. Maybe there is a shared past. Like people that were born, in the 70s will always feel a little bit weird about hearing music from the 80s. And so on. People born in the 90s will feel weird, listening to music from the 2000s and so on. I mean, you bring them back somewhere. And for that reason, you need to know whom you're talking to. Then there is, this dimension of moral belief and tradition and religion and all that you might, lever on. And of course, there is a dimension of entertainment. But again, every time you see entertainment, I put question marks, because for me, entertainment is a little bit poisonous, because I believe we live in a society where there is a little bit too much entertainment and too little depth in the communication. So you need to find ways for people to pay attention to you and feeling that something is really important, and going back to the idea that your brain is changed by the sort of situations you put them in when you tell them stories. You might want to play with love stories. So now these are general sort of structures of your stories. So you might have love stories. You might have situations where there is an underdog, somebody that needs to come up, overcome something like Rocky. You can have murder mysteries and, situation of courage, or especially for scientists, technology and the future and so on and so forth. So this is all very nice, and when I tell this, people say, yes, but, so how do you do it? And this is how you do it. Let me introduce to you this idea of topic and theme. Now we're gonna get into something a little bit deeper, and please, now I'm asking you to really pay attention, because you will see that you will need this later on when I ask you to actually write your stories. So there are two main concepts here that are really important. One is the topic and one is the theme. And the topic is what you really want to explain. So you will see you have been divided up, as Michaela was saying, you have been divided up in several groups, and each group has their own topic. So Down syndrome, for instance, that's a topic. But notice that I didn't say just explain. I actually wrote in bigger letters, explore. So this is the first thing that you really need to understand. When you are a storyteller, when you want to connect, what you really are doing is you are exploring the topic with your audience. Whether you're writing for the web, whether you are writing for, some scientific journal, or whether you are actually talking at some TED talk or TEDx talk, like, I mentioned before, what you do is you are exploring. And most importantly, in my opinion, if you're teaching, when you're creating stories as tools for your own teaching, it's really important that you put yourself in the situation of exploring the topic with the people that are with you. Just like Professor Lewin put himself on the spot by risking his own life. So what do I mean by explore? By explore, I mean to actually ask yourself questions about the topic, questions that you really would like to have answered. By exploring, I mean putting yourself a little bit off balance, so that you don't come with only answers, but sometimes you leave open questions that you might not even know the answer to. Improvise a little bit. So I work a lot with scientists, and later, if you want, I can tell you more about my work with scientists. I create what we call Augmented Lecture, and I know Michela was interested in one, and hopefully we can get to one in the future, because these are really interesting experiments when you have a scientist and an artist together on stage, sort of explaining a topic to the audience. And what I invite them to do is to open up questions that make them a little bit uneasy, which doesn't mean to, embarrass yourself on stage. It really means to stop being the person that knows everything and start to really get into the topic in a way which will surprise you and especially the audience. And the audience will love you, and the audience will want to be with you, and they will really like you for that. All right, so go ahead and explore, and later on I will invite you to do that, and I will tell you if you have been exploring or not exploring, because I have developed an eye for this and I can make your life pretty difficult. So you need to understand the impact of your topic. Impact is another wonderful word that is totally abused, like synergy, impact, things like that. But still, how does it impact with our existence, the topic? So if you're talking about a disease, how does the disease have an impact with the existence of the people that you are targeting your story to? That's why you need to understand your target. That's why you need to understand whom you're talking to. But also, how do you have an impact? So say if you are talking about a new social network, and you are a scientist that studies communication via social networks, how is that going to change relationships between people? Because that's something we can understand. All right? Or if you're talking about a new medicine, a new vaccine, a new tool for vaccines, like mRNA. There is a lot of talk about vaccinations these days, and I can tell you, as a communication practitioner, I have seen a lot of disaster being done in how this whole idea of vaccinations, and especially with mRNA vaccines, how they have been communicated. And the reason is that people made, especially journalists, made a lot of mistakes in the communication of, especially at the beginning. So how does it have an impact with our lives? And then once you have developed that, you move on to the theme. So topic is what you need to talk about. Theme is what you really want to talk about, what is important for you in order to elicit that connection with your audience. And here I'm just going to share this little formula with you that I invite you to really use in the future. Whenever you prepare a talk, whenever you write a new paper, or even if you're writing an abstract for a paper, it's taken from a book by this guy, Randy Olson. Randy Olson was a researcher in marine biology, and then he became a consultant for Hollywood on storytelling and script writing for science in movies. And he wrote a really interesting book called Houston, We Have a Narrative. And he uses this formula in order to understand what he really wants to communicate. And I share this formula with you because I think it's really important. And it goes like this. So while I'm discussing with you about my topic, Down syndrome, what I really care is to talk to you about the theme. And now if you ask me to write about Down syndrome, I might think that the theme could be, for instance, the love of a father for his son or daughter. So the love, or maybe freedom. maybe freedom that is taken away, because when you have a, you know, maybe a severe case of Down syndrome, your life is really changed. Maybe what you really want to talk about is some sort of religious belief about life, so religion. Or maybe what you talk about is health. So that's the main thing for you. So you see, if I tell you about Down syndrome, in fact, I, as a person, I'm gonna tell you something different, not just the topic, but something that really is important for me. And I'm gonna make an effort to understand what that is, because as soon as I touch the theme that is important for me, I will make it important for you. I always bring up, you know, examples like, for instance, if you are an actor and you are playing a very, very, you know, famous character. Say you're an actor playing Hamlet. How many people have played Hamlet in their, you know, in the history of Shakespeare's plays? How many actors have played Hamlet? So what are you going to add to something that has already been done so much and so well by some, you know, really great actors? Well, the reason why people still go to see Hamlet and in the theater, even if they know the, you know, the monologues by heart, say, you know, to be or not to be, is because every time that actor will add an extra layer of understanding about our human existence, if that actor is a good actor. Or, you know, Romeo and Juliet, it will add an extra level of an extra layer of understanding about love relationships and courage and so on, because these themes fit in within the exposition of a storyteller. But what are themes? Well, themes are always universal and they're always existential. And that's a point I really want to stress, because as I told you, I work quite a bit with scientists, and sometimes scientists think that the themes are what they work on. So, you know, maybe for a scientist, maybe a scientist will tell you, yes, a theme for me is, you know, a technique CRISPR, Cas9. That's not a theme. That's not a theme. Themes are freedom, love, friendship, you know, curiosity, fear. That's a theme. And you know that big success of these Marvel Studios movies, I'm sure you're aware of, you know, these big sagas, or even Star Wars, or all of these. The reason why they are so incredibly successful is not different from the reason why Shakespeare's plays are so successful. Is because if you boil them down to some really basic ingredients, and these ingredients are always the same. They are love, they are power, they are courage, they are revenge. These are always the same. They are jealousy. You cannot come up with many more themes than I already have described here, because these belong to our human existence. Everything else is topic. So when you write a story, you better know what theme you're playing with. Because if you don't know what theme you're playing with, you are creating some sort of pudding of things, and you're not focused, you're not aware, and you're not so effective. All right? So later on, when I will ask you to write stories about the topics that have been given to you, I will ask you, what themes are you actually working on? What things are important for you? And mind you, every time you approach even the same topic, you might want to generate, you know, a story about a different thing, because now I want to explore, say, courage, but tomorrow I might be very much interested in friendship. And depending on what I'm interested in, I will create a different story. But I also will create a different abstract for my own article that I'm going to submit on Nature. Because if inside of me there is the desire, to understand better the love between a parent and their child, I will write a type of art of abstract. If, on the other hand, inside of me there is the desire to understand the power struggle between, a big, pharmaceutical companies and researchers, then I will write another type of abstract, although the topic is the same. So that's the kind of level of awareness that I'm asking you to have.
Andrea, sorry, there is a question by
Yes.
Beatriz Garcia, and I think Beatriz, can you ask the question live?
Yes. I was questioning. So regarding one topic, the theme can vary according to the target audience, but I think you just answered that. So it can vary according to the speaker and the audience. So
yes, it can vary according to the day that you're doing it, even
Okay.
in the time of the day. In the morning you might be talking about but mind you, even if the story is written, even if you're reading, if maybe you prepared a TED talk, say you're asked to communicate to a general TED audience, and you prepare a TED talk, and you go, so you're going to be repeating the same things in the morning, say, and in the afternoon. The two deliveries could be really different depending on how you feel about certain topics. So it's not like you're going to change necessarily the words. It's how you stress, how you put, accents on the words, on which words you place more emphasis. That's why even, very famous monologues like, I mentioned To Be or Not to Be by Shakespeare, the actors will repeat the same words, but you can see that some actors are exploring the theme of, say, the love for the mother of Shakespeare, of Hamlet, I'm sorry, or maybe other actors will explore the theme of revenge towards the uncle of Hamlet, or maybe towards friendship, or maybe towards the fear of death, because Hamlet is about to die. So yes, to answer your question, you can change the themes depending on, in fact you have to change the theme depending on the audience, but also depending on how you feel. And that's the beauty of it. That's why it's that's why it's great to go see live performances. When, on TV or on the video, they're always the same, but live they change every time. All right. So, in fact, I was saying this. How do you address the themes? How do you make them relevant? You really try to use keywords that are significative, important, and when you create your story, you want to generate actions and situations that are important with respect to the themes that you're delivering. So, bottom line is, while you explore the topic, and once again, please remember, you are exploring the topic, you are sort of taking the audience on a long voyage. You develop the themes, and you develop them for yourself, and at the same time you develop them for your audience. So this is a key message that I really would like you to keep before we move on to the structure of the story. But I think, Michele, if it's okay with you, I'd like to take a break So
Yes.
everybody can stretch their legs and drink a glass of water and be back. How long?
10 minutes.
All right, so it's 11:05. At
Yes.
11:15 we meet back here. And please think of questions, okay? It's more interesting if we share questions like, you know, we just did. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So see you in 10 minutes.
Yes. Let's get back to what we were doing before. So now we're going to be looking at more of the ingredients
Sorry,
of yes.
can
Yes.
I just make another question?
Yes, of course.
I was wondering regarding this theme and topic thing, when we are developing a theme and if we get the sense that we are not reaching the audience, we are not generating awareness, what should we do? What is your suggestion?
It's really a difficult question to answer like this because it depends on a lot of ingredients. You know, there could be it could be that maybe you are not delivering it correctly in the sense of also technically. How are you talking to people? Are you using the correct language, the correct keywords for people to understand? Are there some technical issues that maybe are preventing you from really generate this connection? But imagine that you are not able to feel this connection with the audience. So let me ask you this: how do you know you're not creating, you know, this awareness? How do you know you're not?
I don't know, by looking at the people, by observing if they are paying attention, any body signals.
Yeah. So body language and
Yeah.
and the way that they are following along is, you know, today it's really hard when you go to conferences. It's really hard to get everybody's attention because people are so distracted by all kinds of tools like their laptops or their phones. So it's really hard. I would say that as long as you are fully centered on what you're talking about, fully centered on being there 100% for your audience, then you are already doing sort of the best that you can do in that moment. But then again, if you didn't manage to create, you know, the most engaging story to begin with, it's really hard to change along the way, unless you're, of course, improvising.
Okay.
So
we should pursue.
Yes.
Okay, and maybe change it in next time.
Yeah, of course. You know, if something is a disaster, don't pursue the disaster. Change. You know, find a way to change maybe along the way. For instance, when I'm on stage, if I'm playing a character in a play, if I'm doing a play or something, and I feel that the audience is not really responding properly, I will change rhythm. I will change the volume of my voice. I will change the position of my body. I work a lot with schools, right? And I do a lot of plays, at least I did before the COVID pandemic. I did a lot of plays in schools. And the schools' audiences are the most difficult ones because students are so easily distracted. And for instance, I know from experience that when I'm talking to a big audience of students, if they are talking among themselves, you know, and if they're making a lot of noise, I instructed my technicians to lower the volume of my voice, you know, to actually remove my microphone so that they have to listen to me in order to understand what I am talking about. Sometimes people make the mistake to raise the volume of their voice and scream, but that's a mistake, because in the theater, at least in the theater, but I'm sure it works just as well also in a classroom. If you scream, the students will actually speak louder, because they are competing with you. So that's an example. Another example is I changed my rhythm. Even now with you, I'm doing it. Even today, I try to have different rhythms. So maybe I will stop, I will look, I will wait to see if something is happening, then I pick up again and I start again. Now, doing it on Zoom is hell. It's so difficult. If we were live, it would be so different. I would jump around, I would move, I would come close, I could look at you. But here on Zoom, I can only play with this, see my hands, and I can do this. But nevertheless, if you feel that your audience is not following you, accelerate or slow down, play with the rhythm. Another way of doing it, another way of creating a connection with your audience, if you feel that they are not following you, is sort of look back at what you have done until that point. Recap your story or your lesson or your lecture and say, okay, look, we have done this and this and this, and this is really good. Now we're moving on in this direction. So you give them an object. You give them you generate some sort of shared image of why they're there, why you're there, and what you're doing. So there are all kinds of tools that you can use and techniques to capture your audience again.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. One last thing. Yeah, okay, somebody's asking if the connection can allow it. Wouldn't it be better to keep our videos on? Yes, if you can. That's great, because I can see you. One last thing that is interesting for you to know is sometimes it really helps to put yourself in a vulnerable position. So if you are feeling that your audience is not able to keep up with you, they're not engaged, sort of get yourself in trouble by making a little mistake. Get yourself in trouble by maybe telling your audience that there is a question that you really don't know how to answer. Get out of your story for a second and show them that you are alive. Give them a reason to stop whatever they're doing to see if you will be able to overcome that specific problem in that precise moment. Okay? So for instance, in theater, directors will direct their actors when there is a disaster. They will direct their actors to actually make mistakes on purpose, so that the audience will be interested to see if the actors will be able to overcome the disaster. And that engages them. And then once you engage with them again, you can pick it up. All right? So it can be dangerous, but it's quite a lot of fun if you can pull it off. All right, but lots of stuff. We could stay here all day talking about this stuff, so I will stop here. But let me go back to what I was talking to you about. So story. Now I'm going to tell you more about the ingredients that go into your story, and of course, let's start by understanding that story is all about change, is all about transformation. Well, this slide is sort of something already I talked about. So you want to seduce your audience and to tell them a story. But your audience already has stories in their head. If you talk to me, I'm alive, I'm already thinking about a million things. Inside my brain, there is already a world going on. So how do you make it more interesting than what already is inside my brain? So you want to create a story that is actually going to stop the audience from doing whatever they're doing, because they find that what you're talking about is actually more exciting. So you need to create a story that is more interesting than what you already, your audience already knows. And how do you do that? Well, you engineer a journey. So this is another fundamental thing that I really would like you to keep from today. The stories are about transformation, are about change, and what is better than a journey to change you and, of course, your audience? So you are sort of the guide of this journey. You are the person that the audience comes to and says, I want to take a journey with you because I know you can guide me through some ideas. You can open up my mind on some ideas. That's why we spend hours and hours reading, say, Dostoevsky. Who in their sane world would pick up a book like The Idiot and spend, I don't know, a month reading it? If not somebody who's interested in going through that beautiful journey that people like Dostoevsky can create. So you want to make sure that you have the ingredients of the journey. And what is a journey? A journey is a voyage that has a complication. So that's another key ingredient of your story. You always need to have a complication to overcome. If you don't have a complication to overcome, then your journey is not a journey, it's a commute. All right? So if every day I take my car and I drive 15 minutes to go to work, that's a commute. But the day that I have a problem with one of my tires and I get stranded in the middle of the road, in a big traffic and everything, and I have to overcome that problem, that's a journey. And why is that a journey? Because that complication, that thing that makes my life difficult will cause a change. All right? So that's another thing that you really need to keep in mind. If you are delivering a story to your audience, you are eliciting a transformation in their existence. And the transformation can be deep or shallow, it doesn't matter, but it is a transformation. Otherwise, it's not a journey. Now you start to see all the ingredients are coming together. We have the topic, we have the themes. The themes are the connection with our own existence. So the things are sort of like our existential, the tools, the ropes connecting me to you when I tell you about it, when I tell you a story. Then you have the problem. Somewhere in there, in your story, you need to have a problem. Otherwise, there is no journey. And this journey has a before and an after. And the after is told by the transformation that you can generate, by the change. So now I'm going to share another talk, TED Talk with you. It's a 15-minute video that I hope you can follow along and make sense out of it. I really think it's important that you try to understand it. Before, when I showed you the video, could you hear the voices properly? Could you hear the sound properly? So you could understand it? Okay, so hopefully we can do the same thing here. Let me stop the share. Let me share again the screen, but this time with the sound. And let's go. Okay, so if there is any problem, please tell me about it so that I can stop right away.
Well, I'm Donald Davis, and I tell stories. If you come to see me at a festival, you will meet me as a performer. But a great deal of the most important work I do is help other people find the stories from their lives that are most important to them. And because the theme today is reflection, it gave me an opportunity to think back about how I began to work with other people's stories and how I learned a few things about those stories. But to do that, I must tell you a story. I want to tell you a story that my father told me only once, more than 50 years ago, and then share his reflection on that story, and then at the very end, a tiny reflection of mine. My father's name was Joe, a very common, ordinary name. Our name is Davis, an even more common, ordinary name. And even in the town where I grew up, Waynesville, North Carolina, there were 3 Joe Davises. So they all had community nicknames so people could tell which one are we talking about this time. There was Joe the photographer, not my dad. There was a farmer named Joe who always used his middle name, Joe Silas, so people could tell him apart. And then there was my father, who was the one-man loan department in our little county seat First National Bank. His community nickname was Banker Joe. Well, I was 13 years old when one day my mother was on her way to the Lady Fair beauty parlor. She didn't want me to go, so she dropped me off and left me at the bank with my dad. My dad would always have things for me to do at the bank. He'd give me an adding machine and the phone book and tell me he needed all the phone numbers added up, and I'd spend all afternoon adding them up, and then... But that day, it was his day to close up at the end of the day after the bank closed. We went out the door. He turned and he locked the door. And as he turned around, Mr. Pitt McCarroll across the street was just locking the front door of McCarroll's Furniture Company. They saw one another, and my daddy said, "Well, hello, Pitt. Have a good night." And Mr. McCarroll looked across at my dad and said, "Well, Cripple Joe, you have a good night too." And we went around and got in the car, and 13 years old, I turned to my dad and said, "I didn't like that." He said, "You didn't like what?" I said, "That man called you Cripple Joe. He's supposed to call you Banker Joe." My dad pulled the Plymouth back up into the parking space, turned off the key, and quietly said, "Let me tell you a little story." And I knew we were going to be there for a while. Well, the beginning of the story I already knew about how my father, number 8 of 13 children, was born in 1901 on a farm way in the North Mountains of Haywood County. In 1906, when he was 5 years old, he was out behind the barn watching his father and his older 2 brothers split cedar shingles to put a new roof on a little building. He was fascinated watching them, watching all the tools, the big froe and wedge and the draw knife, and especially a little short-handled axe that was very, very sharp so they could clean off the shingles with it. He wanted to help, and they kept saying, "You're only 5 years old, get out of the way, you'll get hurt." Well, in a little while, my grandmother called them all to come to dinner on the farm in the middle of the day. And my granddaddy and the 2 older brothers headed inside to eat, and my dad thought, "This is my chance." And he stayed behind so he could touch the tools he had been banned from messing with. He went over and pulled that little sharp axe right out of the end of a log where it had been left, and he told me he went around just chopping everything. And about that time, his mother called, "Come to dinner," because little Joe hadn't come, and he realized, "I better get in there, I'll get caught." And he went back over in a big hurry to chop the little axe back into the log, and he swung the axe missed the log, it glanced off the edge, and the blade buried itself deeply through his kneecap, right into the center of his leg. And that's the way they found little Joe on the ground when they went to see why he hadn't come back. Well, my granddaddy called to my grandmother, "Bring a clean bed sheet while I saddle the horse." They got him up on the horse. My granddaddy got my daddy in his arms and rode to the nearest country doctor's house. The doctor looked at his leg and said, "I've never seen anything like this. I don't know what to do. I guess I'll just have to take his leg off." My granddaddy got him back on the horse. They rode 16 miles on into Waynesville and went to the train station and asked the train agent, "When's the next train coming and where does it go?" The next train coming was not going to Asheville. It was going west toward the end of the Southern line in Murphy. But you could ride to Murphy, get a carriage around town, get on the L&N line, and go to Atlanta. So my granddaddy bought 2 tickets, put my dad on a wooden bench, went out the door, and in about 5 minutes he came back with a quart of homemade corn whiskey. And my dad said he began to give me medicine. And he gave him medicine and gave him medicine until finally my daddy said, "I went to sleep or somewhere." And he remembered nothing about the 172-mile train ride. But once in Atlanta, somehow my grandfather found the brand new 1906 Grady Hospital, and they saved my daddy's leg. They took off the kneecap. He left him with a knee that would barely bend, and instead of a kneecap, a deep scar that a man's thumb could disappear into. Well, when they finally got back home, my daddy discovered he could not do work, especially farm work. And as he described it, he said, "I became one of the girls." His mother, my grandmother, taught him to knit, and he became the family sock knitter. And later on, he learned to spin flax, and he could spin flax better than his 4 sisters. By high school, he began to realize he was going to have to find a way to make a living that didn't involve work. And in the papers the family got, he discovered that down in a place called Charlotte, North Carolina, there was a little school called King's Business College that would teach you how to make a living without working. So he sold socks and he spun flax and saved his money and saved his money. And when he was graduated from high school in 1918, he rode the train to Charlotte, found the little school, and told them he wanted to enroll. They counted his money and told him he didn't have enough for 1 term. But he begged them to let him stay and learn as much as he could till the money ran out. And he began study and he began to school. And before that term was over, they came back and told him to go home and not waste the rest of his money. Because they explained to him that in less than 1 term, he had learned all of the business, bookkeeping, typing, and shorthand they normally taught in 2 years. He said, "I had to learn. The money was running out." So he got back home without even a piece of paper to show that he had ever been to school, but with skills. And he was hired to be the first professional business manager ever hired by 2 old men to run a wholesale grocery company. The very next year, his father died, leaving him 5 little brothers and sisters to finish raising, and a widowed mother and an aunt who was a member of the household to care for. For the next 20 years, he raised the children, took care of his mother, took care of his aunt, raised the children, worked, saved his money, raised the children, worked, took care of his money. Got to be 40 years old, and he told me he had forgotten to do two things. He forgot to get married. I don't think he had time. And he forgot to spend money. And when he was 41 years old, the old man who had started that little bank in Waynesville decided to sell it. And my dad entered into the deal. And when he met my mother, when he was 44 and she was 25, he was Banker Joe. By now it was dark in the Plymouth. And my dad looked at me in the dark and he said, "Son, don't you get it? Don't you get it? If I hadn't gotten to be Cripple Joe, I would never have gotten to be Banker Joe. If I'd never gotten to be Cripple Joe, I would be plowing with mules on iron duff, and you'd be in trouble with every teacher you've had who ever borrowed money from me." He said, "You must learn that it is never, never tragic when something people think is bad happens to you. Because if you can learn to use it right, it can buy you a ticket to a place you would never have gone any other way." After that day, it was okay with me if people called my dad Banker Joe. But what I really liked was when people knew his whole story well enough to look at him and say, "Hello, Cripple Joe." Now that's the story I heard once when I was 13. And years passed without my really thinking about it, but of course never forgetting the story. About 30 years later, I was already doing storytelling and beginning to work with people on stories when I was visiting my father, now in the latter half of his 80s. And as we were visiting, all of a sudden, for some reason, that story came back. And I said to my dad, this is his reflection part now, "How did you get to be able to tell the story the way you told it to me? Had you told it before that?" And he looked at me and he said, "Only about 200 times. And I got to hear a little story I almost missed." He said, "When I came back from Atlanta, 5 years old, now with a crippled leg, Mama, my grandmother, who died before I was born, so I never met her, Mama sat me down at the kitchen table and she said, 'Joe, now it's time for you to tell the story.' And he said, I said I didn't want to tell the story because telling the story wouldn't change anything. I was crippled. And she looked at me and said, 'You're not telling the story to change what happened. You're telling the story to change you.' And she made me tell it over and over again. And every time I told it, she gave me a different agenda. She said, 'Now, Joe, this time tell the story and tell what you learned by living through that.' And then another time, 'Now tell the story and tell what you think your daddy and I learned from living through that.' And eventually it was even tell the story and tell what you think the doctors in Atlanta learned from living through that. And we went on, and we went on, and we went on. And one day she said, 'Now, Joe, if you don't tell this story enough, when you're 50 years old and you look at your leg, you'll be 5 again, and you'll be pitiful. Because when something happens to you,' she said, 'it sits on top of you like a rock. And if you never tell the story, it sits on you forever. But as you begin to tell the story, you climb out from under that rock, and eventually you sit up on top of it. He said, one day she said, now, Joe, today tell the story and tell what you get to do now that your brothers don't get to do. And he said, I told the story, and all of a sudden I was smiling because I realized I get to stay in the house and read while they work on the farm. And she had me tell that story and tell it until when I was about 15 years old, I decided that chopping my leg was the best thing I'd ever done in my life. And all of a sudden I realized she was right. The story doesn't change what happened, but the story has the remarkable power to completely change our whole relationship to happening. I almost didn't hear that part of the story. And I realized that I have 2 degrees from respectable educational institutions. I will not name them in this audience because they're in North Carolina. And yet I learned more about what I do, helping people discover the stories that are sitting on them and crawl out from under them, from listening to my grandmother's story than I ever learned in school.
Okay, let's go back to the regular share. Okay, very well. So I really wanted you to follow along. I hope you were able to follow along this talk, because I believe it really introduces properly the whole concept of why we tell stories. This idea of telling stories to change. The stories as a generator of transformation, and the stories to share common experiences that can become common so that we learn from them. And I think it's a really beautiful story. And also notice how well he was delivering it. He's a very, very good storyteller. And did you notice at the beginning he says, this is the structure of what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to tell you a story, then a little story, and then how this story has changed me. And he told you that so that as you were hearing it, you were actually seeing forward with your mind's eye of what was happening and what was coming. So that's a really nice technique. So please keep in mind then what we're talking about. We're talking about a journey. We're talking about the transformation, the ability to change, not just change the audience, but change you who are telling the story, because that's what stories do. And here is how stories are constructed. I'm sure some of you know already. I've heard about this already. This is the hero's journey. The hero's journey was constructed by an anthropologist, Joseph Campbell, in the first part of the 20th century. He managed to travel all over the world, and he connected with all kinds of populations and people, and from every continent on Earth. And he listened to stories and he tried to catalog them, and he realized that essentially all the stories from anywhere in the world, from Africa, Latin America, Europe, wherever, Asia, they tend to have the same construction, which we call the hero's journey. He called it the hero's journey. It's a really famous and really important structure that we use even nowadays, because it goes back probably 2,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago. People telling stories already were using it. And it works like this: boiled it down to its most important details. I'm not going to get into the finer details because it's not useful here for us now. But of course, I invite you, if you're curious, to look it up on the internet. There is a lot of material on the hero's journey, and you, of course, you're welcome to read The Hero with 1,000 Faces, which is the book of Joseph Campbell. And so the hero's journey is, if you look at it from its simplest point of view, it's this: a hero walks into a land of wonders, enters a different space from what the hero is used to, and faces a terrible problem or some fight in order to achieve a victory. And when victory is achieved, the hero brings back wisdom for the other fellow people that he can connect with. So let's look back at the story that we just saw from the TED Talk in Charlottesville that I was sharing with you before. There is the father is, just a 5-year-old kid who happens to chop his own leg, and there he enters a land of supernatural wonders, if you want. Of course, it can be positive or negative, the connotation you can choose. The problem is that he could have lived his whole life as a crippled man and be miserable. And that's his big problem he has to overcome. So he fights this problem. And he fights this problem with the help of some people, which Joseph Campbell called the mentor. You see, there is a mentor on the right side of this journey. The mentor. The mentor is the grandmother, is the mother of the father, so the grandmother, telling the kid to sit down and tell the story over and over and over again. So the kid overcomes his big problem by telling the story over and over and over again. And when he comes out of this terrible situation, he finally can bring wisdom to his fellow men. And in particular, bring wisdom to his son, who is now bringing wisdom to us. So you can see how the story was about the transformation. There is a before, there is an after, and there is a big problem to overcome. And this is the hero's journey. So please keep this in mind, because we're going to be using this later on when I will ask you to write your own stories. Now, the land of wonders is something that we really need to understand. And for that, I want to bring out again our friend Richard Feynman from before. And especially talking about science now. And he says, while I'm describing to you how nature works, you see, you won't understand why nature works that way. But you see, nobody understands that. That is sort of includes in a beautiful way this whole idea of the land of wonders. We can never explain things. We can explain how things work. We can explain how things happen. We can explain how we can chop our leg, when we are 5 years old. But why that happens in a deep spiritual, existential way, we cannot explain. That's why there is so much room for us to introduce our themes. That's why there is so much room for us to give our own point of view, because it's never absolute, it's always relative. And that's the beautiful part of this whole storytelling voyage that I'm trying to take you along. Okay, so I really would like you to keep this in mind, that that leaves this gray area where we can really move, because we can never explain why things work that way. Or still, if you're talking about the land of wonders, this is another quote by another very famous scientist, Isaac Newton. And also, you see, Isaac Newton was a genius, but also he realized that, you know, he could explain a lot of things, but there was so much left in front of him that he couldn't explain. So this is the attitude he had. He says, I do not know what I may appear to the world, but to myself I seem to have been only like a boy playing on the seashore and diverting myself in now and then, finding a smooth pebble or a prettier shell than ordinary, whilst the great ocean of truth lay all undiscovered before me. So I hope you understand why I'm giving you these quotes. And it goes back to what I was telling you about before. The story is a voyage of discovery for you who is delivering the story. You need to be just like Isaac Newton, like a child on the seashore, finding a beautiful pebble and understanding that in front of him there is a huge ocean of undiscovered beauty right in front of you. So you are going to be discovering this beauty with the people that you will be sharing your story with. Okay? So this whole idea of the hero's journey is really simple. It's really simple when you boil it down to the very, very simple ingredients. This is how it goes. Everything goes really well, and then there is an unforeseen complication. You fight really hard to overcome the complication, and oftentimes you need the help of people, of your mentor, somebody that can help you. But then once you have overcome, you have been changed, and now you explain this transformation to us, because now you become our mentor. See, and that's how it works. I listen to your story because I want you to become my mentor. Have you noticed a lot in movies? They do it a lot. There is a character telling a story to another character. And so they tell, they in movies you will see somebody, when there is a difficult situation, somebody will say, let me tell you a story. And they go off on some story about, 20 years ago when they were younger and this and that. And that's because by telling that story, they become mentors for the problem, for the story that is happening now. So you have this power of writing a story or devising a story or improvising a story that helps me as your audience to understand better my own reality. You help me understand the transformation that I need to go through by means of your story. And your story only needs some simple ingredients like the ones that I am giving you here. But in order for your story to really work, you always need to understand what transformation you are generating. In other words, don't hope that it will generate a change. Make sure that it will generate change by inserting the understanding and the awareness of the transformation within the story, just like that storyteller from before, Davis, did with us. Okay? So if later on, when we will work on our stories, I will ask you, what themes are you developing? What is the problem? what is the transformation that you hope to elicit? What is the, what is the legacy that your story is going to give us, so that I will be a different person, from listening to it. All right. So if you can answer these questions, you have gone a long way, and it's quite important. So this is the basic outline of anything that you can write that has the structure of a story. And again, even an abstract can have the structure of a story. And the way to do it is really simple. You do the status quo. So even in the abstract, you explain what the situation is. Then you explain what the complication is. And then you do the development. The development typically is in 3 parts, but it doesn't have to be 3 parts. You try to solve your problem number 1, try to solve your problem number 2, try to solve your problem number 3, and then you have the solution. You have the transformation, and then you have the new status quo. So if you can remember this basic outline, anytime you write anything, even an article for a blog or even a post on Facebook, if you can use this outline, I assure you it will be impactful. All right? Might not be a masterpiece. You need a lot more than this to become a masterpiece, but it surely will be impactful, and it surely will stand on its feet. So later on, please remember, this is the basic outline that I will ask you to work with. Okay, so your story always needs to have an event, which is sort of the turning point. Now, for instance, in the story that we heard before by Davis about the child and all that, what do you think the problem was? Can any one of you share? Maybe you can say something. Let me ask you.
The injury.
That's the problem, but there is a bigger problem than the injury, and the bigger problem, in my opinion, is the fact of feeling sorry for yourself, the fact of not of always feeling self-pity. So the injury causes the risk of feeling really sorry for yourself. So yes, the problem is the injury and the consequences of the injury. Now, what about the main event? What do you think is the situation that Davis was, the storyteller, was working on, that wanted to get to, the turning point of the whole story? What do you think it was?
To change itself, to learn.
Mm-hmm.
No?
Yes, that was the consequence of the main event. So in my opinion, and it's not an exact science here, we're not talking about mathematics, okay? So anybody can have their own opinion here. In my opinion, the main event was when the mother of the kid told the kid, stay here and tell the story. And tell the story not once, not twice, but 200 times. Because that is the turning point. That is the moment that the kid starts to change. That is the moment that defines the rest of the life of the kid. Okay, so in any story, there is always a main event. And the main event may not be the problem. Okay? It could be, but it may not be. And a good storyteller always knows what the main event is. It's really a fundamental concept for you as a storyteller, because as you deliver your story, you work towards the main event. All right, as you deliver the story, it's like if you're guiding people through Venice, you know your main event is going to be when you get into the Tower of St. Mark in St. Mark Square. You know that's where things will happen. All right, and you walk people through the little ways of Venice, but you sort of build up so that you get to the main event. And as a storyteller, you really need to know where that main event is. And as a storyteller, you always make an effort to understand the consequences of that main event, and therefore the consequences of that on the audience. All right, so these are really simple ingredients I'm giving you because I don't want to make your life difficult. We are going to be using this later on, and of course I'll be more than happy to go back to them later on if you need to. In fact, now in the last 20 minutes, 25 minutes that we have, I'm going to talk to you about some delivery techniques that will be useful later. But please stop me now if you have any questions, and let's devote a few minutes to these really simple things I told you, but they can be incredibly complicated later on when you actually try to write your own stories. Do you have any questions?
I might start, maybe. I have one.
Yes.
I was wondering if the main event is somehow the apex of the story, you know, the highest point, and if you place it towards the end of the story or not. Is that a rule or not?
No, there is no rule. Sometimes the main event is actually at the end of the story, and sometimes the main event can be outside of your story. Sometimes the main event can be after the story, and you just refer to it. So it really depends on how you construct it. But yes, the main event is the apex. The main event is that thing that generates the change. Okay, it's when you finally understand that there is a way out of that there is a solution. There is a before and an after. You know, if you play the guitar, the main event is when Jimi Hendrix was born. You know, because there is a before and after Jimi Hendrix. There was a way to play the guitar before Jimi Hendrix and a way to play the guitar after Jimi Hendrix, and so on and so forth. So in your story, you want to find out where the Jimi Hendrix moment is.
Mas já estão prontos, eu acho que eles foram adiantando. Ok,
So does it make sense, Michele?
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? What about the themes? Does it make sense to you? Yes. All right. But please stop me anytime, okay? Because I usually, when I deliver workshops, I know people tend to say yes, but then they get really confused afterwards. So, of course, we will be able to answer all kinds of questions.
I have a question, Andrea.
Yes.
So what would you say is the theme of this story?
Of which story? Or the story that we watched, that we
Yes.
just saw before? Beautiful
Self-pity
question.
or...
Yeah, no, I think... there are several possible themes. One of them is fate. Fate is sort of accepting things as they happen. Is, you know, your fate as a human is to have your leg chopped, and what do you do with that? So one of them could be that. Another one could be courage, of accepting things, sort of, you know, even the storyteller was like, yeah, I'm sitting on top of things, I am courageous. Another one which I really love is this amazing love that these mother and father of this kid had for them. They are the fact that the mother would say, I mean, I can only imagine how hard it must have been for the mother to have a 5-year-old kid with that kind of, you know, problem, especially in 1906, when he could have died from any disease, you know, infection and all that. So, and to be able to sit there with a kid and say, tell me your story 200 times. So there are some really different themes, and that's one question, that's one thing that I really want you to understand, is that you don't need to develop only one theme in one story. You can actually work on several of them, especially when there are stories that are very articulated, like this one, you know, lasted 15 minutes. You can touch several different themes, like friendship. You know, he said, I loved when people called my father Banker's Joe, but I really loved when they called him Crippled Joe, because it means they knew his story, they knew his history, they knew where he comes from. So there is one of the themes there absolutely was friendship. So as Davis moved from one moment of the story to the next, he was able to highlight different themes along the way. A little bit as if he was, you know, with a flashlight, pointing the flashlight to the different moments in his story. And so you, as an audience, and me, and every one of us, we can link to one of these things and find that it's the one that we love. Because maybe if you talk about friendship, maybe I am not interested. But if you talk about courage, maybe I'm really interested. So in a story that talks about friendship, courage, pain, fate, you will always find something that is interesting for you. And all you need is 1 or 2 moments in a story to be able to connect. You don't need, you don't need so much. I hope I answered your question.
Definitely, yes.
All right. Good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Is this too abstract for you? Does it make sense? All right. Okay.
Yeah.
You will see how you are going to enjoy, hopefully, writing the stories, because you can practice this stuff that we're talking about and actually make sense out of them.
Sorry, Andrea, I don't know if
Yes.
you hear me. I have another question. So
Yeah.
I think I see how the story goes, but my question is regarding, I mean, when you want to tell something about a story about science,
Yeah.
and a science that is still ongoing, so it's not that you are telling, whatever story about something that happened in the past, but it's hard for me to see, because there is no change yet, no? So you are developing something and you want to communicate your science, but you still don't know how the future will be, no?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if you have like a rule of how can we tell something that is still uncertain of how it will end.
Yeah. In fact, it depends what we mean by story. The story doesn't need necessarily to describe your research, 100%, as you're not necessarily going to write a story to really describe your research only. You're telling your story to describe your research and how that research has sort of had an impact with you as a researcher, as a human being, and maybe other people, and therefore the people that are in your audience. So even if the research doesn't have a final conclusion, doesn't have the results, or even if the results are negative, like I know you're going to be talking about at the in one of the next few lectures towards the end of the week, if I understand correctly, it still is material for creating a story. So if you don't have clear results yet, you can explain where you are. You can explain what your anticipation is. You can explain what your hopes are. What you can talk about what happens if a failure happens in the process of research. So giving the results is only one of the things that you need to do. The other things are showing the transformation that is happening along the way. But of course, it really depends on the stakeholders. So if you're talking to other researchers at some conference, you need to really work on a specific way to create your story. If you're talking to students in a high school, it's a whole different ball game. So to be able to answer your question, we need to really talk about what is the target that you're looking at, and what do you want to achieve with this target. What are your intentions? That's another keyword. What are my intentions with the target that I'm working with? And so we really need to look at the different situations. In fact, during the workshop later in the afternoon, I'm going to anticipate now what we're going to do. We are going to give you different stakeholders and ask you to devise stories that actually target those stakeholders with different intentions. And I'm going to ask you to help me understand who the stakeholders could be and what these intentions could be. So that at the end, when you will deliver the story to us, we will be able to say, yes, it works, or no, it doesn't work. And what could you have done differently, or what you did that really works, so that we can all learn from your experience. So hopefully this question that you asked me will be answered also in the afternoon.
Sorry, can I also ask something about these stories that may not have an end?
Yeah.
Even if we're not talking about, for example, our results, it's easy for me to think on a number of stories or films or stuff like that do not actually end in a straight point. They have kind of a suspense in the end. We don't know where. We can imagine several ways to finish that story. Do you think it is possible to go in that sort of approach when talking about science, or does it get even more complicated for the audience?
No, it really depends on how you construct it. And as I said before, we're not talking about a theorem in mathematics here. We are talking about something that is extremely artistic in nature. And in fact, even the word story can be misleading. You're not really telling a story. What you're doing, you are narrating an idea. And you're doing it by means of imaginative, of an imaginative approach. So you are narrating a scientific idea by means of an imaginative approach. If your approach is constructed so that you leave some sort of cliffhanger at the end.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about.
Yeah, then it's great. I'll be
because
curious.
Science in the end is none of what we do is finished. It's never finished. So I can picture a story that isn't finished also, and I think it would be a nice mirror for what we do on or how we work.
As long as the story acts as a transformation agent, it's okay. And as long as the story includes the ingredients that you really want to deliver, so depending on your target, what you want them to understand, how much you want them to understand about your topic, and so on, then anything is good. I mean, if it works, it works. If you make me excited about something, it's great. And maybe I will never be able to do the same way you do it, and maybe I will come up with something else. So I'm just going to give you, I'm just giving you the basic ingredients, and then each one of you is going to take them and do whatever you want with them, because it's your own, you know, it's your own art in some sense. You become artists. Yes? It's difficult for scientists to imagine sometimes themselves as artists, but you really are, because you are creative, you create things, and you do things that, you know, there was a before and after you. If you actually have done real research, there was a before and after you. So why not be able to tell this before and after? You know what I mean? Yeah. Okay, so let's look at some interesting techniques that can also be useful for you. One of the greatest mistakes of storytellers is to explain things. In fact, it's much better to show things. Now, I'm sure you've heard this before. Don't explain, show. Show, don't tell. In the story that we saw before, Davis did exactly that. He built situations where things would happen. He didn't need to explain them to us. The situations happened, and we learned from the situations. Of course, afterwards, there was an explanation. But before, we actually learned from the situations themselves. So make an effort to explain what are the impacts of your science. Why or how your characters that you will develop, that could be you. Maybe you're telling a story about yourself. You need your own science in order to exist. How you define your existence with respect to the science that you're talking about. So show me these things. Don't tell me that you love science. Show me that you stay up until 5 o'clock in the morning every night in your laboratory to achieve the results. That explains to me that you love science, but you didn't need to tell me that. All right? Don't tell me that you hate your colleague. Show me that every time your colleague is in the room, you move somewhere else. If you create a situation for which this happens, I understand that you don't like your colleague so much. But you don't need to tell me you hate your colleague, because you showed it to me. And the showing part is so much more powerful than the telling part. Okay? So this is the first fundamental technique that we use in order to sort of get people to understand ideas. Then, make sure that there are actions. Make sure that things happen. You know, you take the kid to the next train station, then you take the horse for 16 miles, then you make the kid drink a lot of whiskey because otherwise, you know, and this and move on, and the situations and the actions are, I am inside the car and my father is telling me, and now that it's becoming dark and things are happening all the time. These actions make your storytelling so much more effective. Now you might say, okay, great, but what are the actions if I'm talking about, you know, science? Well, the actions have to do with your own life or the life of your characters. Maybe the character has got, you know, a problem with her, I don't know, her arm, and I cannot do something. Or maybe the character has, needs to, connect with her children because she's doing research at the same time she has 5 children, things like that. Actions, situations, things that actually make me understand things by showing and not telling. And this is, again, the final thing that I can tell you that I'm going to look for is, don't just try to make people change. Find always ways for which your story will change you every time you tell it. So every time you have the option, the opportunity of telling your story, go in there with your own sort of transparent and honest heart and say, I'm gonna be changed by this. I need to learn something new today. So this is how I do it. Before I go on stage and I do my plays, and please remember that actors rehearse the plays a lot. So I know my stories a lot. I know them really well. So when I go on stage, I have done my story, hundreds of times before. But every time I go on stage, I think to myself, what am I going to learn today? What is the question I want to answer today? And every time that question is going to be a little bit different. So for instance, today I want to learn about pain. So imagine, I'm going to tell you the story that we heard before. Today I'm going to learn about pain. So every time there is a referral, a reference to pain. So when you put your knife through your kneecap, or when you can't walk, or when somebody calls you crippled, I want to understand what that does to me as Andrea, not as my character, as me. I want to understand that. And so if I go on stage thinking, what am I going to learn today? I will live through the situations in a very honest and transparent way, and the audience will see it. This happens when you go to conferences. This happens if you're delivering a lecture in a school, if you're teaching. And it also happens when you write your story for a newspaper. Ask yourself, what am I going to learn from this? All right? So this is, we're coming to an end of this, and let me share one final thing. You might think that writing a story is difficult. Here is a very simple 6-word story by Hemingway. For sale, baby shoes never worn. All right? These 6 words contain a universe, and each one of us might think that this universe has some ingredients in there that we attach to. For instance, for me, maybe I feel that this baby has died, so it's a very sad story, maybe, and for me the baby has died, and the parents didn't even have the chance to put shoes on the baby, so they sell them because they're too painful. So there is, there we have the problem. The problem is the child died. And how do the parents overcome the problem? By selling the shoes. That's great, but we don't need to be so sad. The same story can be read in very, very different way. Maybe the baby is, very lucky, and the whole village where the baby was born bought shoes for the baby. And now the parents have 300 pairs of shoes they don't know what to do with. So they have to sell them, right? And so there we go. Maybe it's a happy story. Hey, we have a lot of shoes for babies. They've never been worn. Come and buy them, right? So you see, the same story contains universes, contains themes in there: happiness, sadness, death, love, friendship, and so on. 6 words can contain so much. Imagine what you can do with 10,000 words. All right? So this is my invitation, is to play around and enjoy yourselves. So we're going to look at the workshop, and I'm going to leave you now with this question, so that when we come back from the lunch break, we can start right away, because I really need your help here, because you are the ones who know how it, what are the stakeholders that you want to communicate to. And later on, I will also ask you, what do you want to achieve with these stakeholders? So what are your intentions? I'm sure you're familiar with the pitches, like 3 minutes pitch, or maybe even the elevator pitch. When you have a great idea and you want to communicate it in very, very few sentences, maybe inside an elevator, what do you want to achieve? If you don't know what you want to achieve, then forget it. You might not even open your mouth. But if you have a very clear idea what you want to get, then you can really come up with some beautiful 30 seconds, elevator pitch or a story. So what I'm going to ask you later is to write a story that will last 5 minutes, and we are going to listen to it and give you feedback. But let's start from the basics. Whom you want to communicate with. So it's 12:31. I'm trying to stay on time because I know Zoom is terrible if people start to blabber off too much. But please, if you have any questions before our sandwiches, let me know. And Michela, maybe you want to say something, or
Yes, I wanted to tell everybody, please do not disconnect. If you can, just keep connected. So, switch off your camera whenever we will stop, and then be back at 1:30. Yeah, and I think for the rest, if someone wants to have a sandwich together with the other participants in front of the screen, of course, this is allowed. So if there are people already with their sandwich ready, unfortunately I have to go and cook for my daughter, so I will not be around for the next 45 minutes. But this is a space you can keep using during the break if you want to chat with someone also.
So Michela, you already have a story. You wanted to stay in front of the computer and chat about science, but you had to prepare the sandwich for your daughter.
Yes.
And all you wanted was to communicate your new discovery, you see? So instead you tell your new discovery to your daughter. So if you write this story, you can talk about your new discovery, but also create a very human situation. And there you have a story, you see? A story talking about science.
I can add the fact that she's home because she didn't go to school because she has a cold. And in these COVID times, whenever you have a cold, you have to wait for a test. So we have also a virus in the story, if you like.
Okay.
Hopefully not.
Hopefully not. I hope not.
Okay, so.
All right. Yeah. So at 1:30, right?
Yes.
We're going to meet again.
We will be back at 1:30.
Okay. Have a happy sandwich, everybody.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you.
So now we're coming to the workshop part of my introduction to storytelling as a tool for science communication. And the first thing that I need to do with you, because it's really important, because I also don't know very much about your field, so it's important that I also learn, is the idea of your stakeholders. Whom are you interested in communicating to? And you do that, and I will take note. So let me open my notebook here, because I would like to then later be able to give you tasks relating exactly to the stakeholders that you came up with. So there we go. I just opened my little notebook, and I need for you to turn on your microphones, and let's have a little conversation about this. Who would be the stakeholders for you that you really would like to communicate with? Let's see if we come up with at least 5 of them.
You're talking about our individual reports, the ones that we were given.
Yeah, imagine you need to come up with a communication. To whom would you be communicating with?
Other scientists?
Sorry, but in our own work or on the case studies you sent us?
Your own world.
Okay.
Participants of genomic research. Patients and parents of the patients.
Wait. And parents of the patients. Very interesting, yes.
Funding committees.
Funding committees.
Investors? Yeah, it's kind of the same.
Well, they're different, but similar but different.
Okay.
Ethical committee or drug committee.
Just 1 second. So ethical.
Investors.
Yeah, investors. I put ethical committees, and you said drug committees.
Yes, drug committee.
Okay, you will need to tell me what they are.
They're the bodies in the hospital that approve certain therapies or clinical trials.
Who else?
Companies, headquarters might be, I don't know.
Companies. Like the headquarters, but wouldn't there be companies that you're selling your products to,
Yeah,
your research?
exactly.
So, yeah.
General public as well.
Yeah, you were forgetting that.
Students too.
Or friends and families as well.
Yes. What else? We have a lot of them already.
I wonder if it's included, but I would say regulatory agencies, probably in the drug part, it may be included.
So let me share this little thing that I'm writing, so that maybe it's better than sharing the other screen that we already you know already. So okay, and I can do this, and I can do this. We have it. I'm gonna share this because you can see what I was writing. Okay, so this is what we have written so far. Other scientists, participants of genomic research, patients and the parents of the patients, funding committees, investors, ethical committees, drug committees, company that you are selling to. So yeah, I can't find the correct word for that. General public, students, friends and families, and regulatory agencies. Can you all see this, or it's too small?
No, it's okay.
I can make it a little bit bigger. Now, the next question is to understand what you want to obtain from them. But let's take a step back and let's decide that we are already going to start dividing you up in the groups. So let me show you what the groups are. So right now we have this list. In fact, should I put this in the chat? Let's do this. chat. There we go. And I'm gonna send this to everybody. There we go. So this is what we have written. So now I will stop the sharing and start the sharing again, but this time we have the groups. So there we go. Okay, so these are the groups. So you are going to be divided up, you know already, because I know Michela told you at the beginning. There are several groups, 6 groups if I remember correctly, or 7. And this is group A, and you're going to be working on Down's syndrome. Okay, so please take note of where you are. This is group B, and you're going to be working on the Machado-Joseph disease. I hope you know what it is, because I surely don't. This is group C, and you're also going to be working on the Machado-Joseph disease. Please take note of where you are in this list. Then you have group D, and you are going to be working on the ceroid lipofuscinosis. This sounds like a very complicated thing. Group E, also on that. You should find your name in there. And group F, finally, is going to be working on Down's syndrome. Is there any one of you who's not in this list? So everybody's in the list. Very good. So now what I want to do with you is match a group with a stakeholder. And I'm going to stop the share, go back to my notes there, text edit. There we go. And I ask you please to tell me if you which one would you like to work on. So let's start with group A. Which one and would you like to work on? Just one of you. Why don't you take your responsibility for the rest of the group and say which one you would like to work on?
I'm happy to do the first one.
The other scientists,
for example.
Okay. So this is group A. Very good. What about group B? Which one would you like to work on?
Okay, I suggest general public.
Yes, general public is always good. Very good. What about group C? Don't be shy. Otherwise, I just tell you.
I suggest patients and parents, for example.
Yes, very nice. So this is group C. What about group D?
We can go for investors, maybe.
Yes. Okay, what about group E?
I would say funding committees.
Yeah. I was going to say that.
Okay, and one last one is group F, and I'm going to tell you it's important that we also look at students, okay, because all of you might be involved in teaching at one point or another, or you already are. So I think
so
it's
students.
important that we look at that. Sorry?
So students for us, I would say.
It's sold, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting that you didn't pick students right away. Unless you are desperate to try something else, of course. You're welcome to also try different ones. Okay, so this is just an exercise. So I'm sorry. Let me write this. E and so this is what we're going to be working on, and now I will also copy this in the chat so that we don't forget. Okay. There we go. And now we can go back to our slides. And now the next task is this one that I am going to share with you. Now for each group, I'm going to ask you to identify your stakeholder and what you want to obtain from them. And for this, I will ask our technical support to split us into groups. But before they do it, please let me give you an overview of where we're going. So I will give you 5 minutes to think about identifying your stakeholders and what you want to obtain from them. So what your intention is. And then after you do that, we are going to be starting to work on the real story. And identify why that your topic has an existential impact and how, the themes that you would like to develop, create the outline. And let me remind you what the outline is. And then after we do this, I'm going to ask you to actually write your story. And then after we do this, I'm going to ask you to think of how you're going to deliver your story to us. So this is the work that we're going to do during the next 2 hours in the afternoon, 2.5 hours, or 3 hours in fact. So let me go back. Now we're going to identify the stakeholder and what you want to obtain from them, because it's really important. And then we actually start to work on the story. And then we write the story, and then we deliver the story. So this is the process. And we deliver the story to everybody. So after we are done with the writing the story and we understand what we want to do with it, we come back to the common room with everybody and deliver the stories. And then I will give you feedback on them. And we can talk about the problems that we had, and we can talk about how effective they were, and so on and so forth. So it's quite an ambitious plan. Usually, this takes a little bit longer, but today we can try to do it. And I'm sure and confident that you can do a great job with this. All right, so I ask, if possible, the technical technical support to please split us into different rooms, and I will now, I imagine I should stop sharing. I don't know, somebody should tell me about this, because I don't know if you can be split if I share, but maybe not. And you think about your what you want to obtain from your stakeholders, and the stakeholders are those that I put, that we decided, that I put in the chat. Any questions?
I think they have gone, almost all of them.
Oh, they've moved to a parallel universe.
In fact, there are few left.
Okay.
Andrea, quindi tu salti poi da un gruppo all'altro dando indicazioni. Sì. Credo di poterlo fare anch'io.
Sì, adesso io passo da uno all'altro.
E quindi
sì,
poi
sì.
l'idea è che tornano
alle 4.
You are all set as co-host, so you can move between the different rooms. Just pressing the assign group buttons. Well, the group section buttons. I don't know how it says the Zoom in Italy or
I
in
don't
English.
see the button. Remind me where it is. I can't remember. I know we did a rehearsal, but
okay.
I don't see it.
Let me.
Okay.
Okay.
Now I see it. Okay.
So everyone see the button?
Yeah. There is a
break.
Yes. It has been an exciting half an hour. I was running from one room to the next and I could see that there was a lot of work being done. So I thank you already for all of this. And we are not finished yet. We still have a little bit of work to do. So don't lose all of your energy. Stay with us. Stay with us. Usually, if we were doing, a live exercise, I would get you stand up and do some theater training exercise now, where we do games and stuff like that. I know Milena would like that. But we are on screen, and I hate exercising on screen. I've seen situations where people, ask people to clap together and things like that, but I'm not so much into it. So I will not do this with you, but I just want you to know that now we are really eager to hear about your outlines. And that's the basic, starting point. And then I will ask you to go back into the rooms and write your stories. And then finally come and deliver the stories to us. So we're going to have a little piece of theater at the end. And it's going to be an exciting theatrical moment where, each group is going to deliver some of your work. But let's get started hearing about the outlines, and I would start with group F. Let's start from the... Yes, I can see.
Oh, no, you won't. I was rushing that. No. No, because I was trying to share some final last idea with my group. Right. And I won't share it live because otherwise they will tell no, it's a shitty idea and
Go for it, Francesca.
It's terrible. Jesus
well,
Christ.
It's not like you can do much. Now you're supposed to listen to everybody. You're not supposed to keep working on yours.
But when you turn to the group, I was starting to tell the idea, so it's not fair. I was thinking maybe we could go from like a 3-generation story, and
But before you do it, first let me ask you this. Let's remind everybody what your group is about. Your group is about.
We're talking about Down syndrome.
Down syndrome, and you're talking to students.
Yeah, and we wanted to make them curious enough about the topic to really start working on it. So let's say someone who is finishing their degree and has to choose a work for master's or PhD, and we are trying to tell them a story so that they feel, oh, it would be really nice to go and have my next years working on this disorder. And what we learned about Down syndrome so far is that like 30 or 40 years ago, the lifespan of someone with Down syndrome would be really small, and they were kind of supposed to die early. And today they can live until their 50s or 60s, and that increase in lifespan and their quality of life was given by science. So that's really important, but it has also shown other challenges. So people with Down syndrome are living longer, and they are having lots of trouble that we didn't know existed a few years ago. And dementia is one of those problems. They have a phenotype that's quite similar to Alzheimer's disease. So on the paper sheets you sent us, there's a proposal for therapy that's drug repositioning that goes from drugs that are already on the market for other disorders and try to make them work for this dementia phenotype of these patients. So we had agreed that our skater holders were students. What we wanted was them to engage to this topic and come work with us, and we were trying to set the topics for the whole story. What we wanted was to have like a before and after science, I would say in general. So before the really small lifespan with lots of associated problems, and today reality these patients face, so that we had an opportunity to like propose this new therapy, and that would be kind of the work those students would have. But we hadn't come with a story.
Francisca,
I had something on my mind, but
let me stop you 1 second, because I'm not asking you to tell us any story or anything. Also because I would really would like for us to have the time to do it, to develop it later. Here I'm asking you to just share your outline, and the outline should be really simple, just a few words, because then we are all going to be moving back into our rooms. Oops, somebody's ringing on the bell. No, let's.
But we don't have the outline.
You don't have the outline?
No, we don't.
Okay. Then you are going to be working on this next, okay? Don't worry. Now you understand your stakeholders. You understand why you're doing it. So you already are moving along. So we need to come up with a story. Oh, 1 second. I need to take 2 seconds from you all. 1 second.
Perhaps in the meantime, we all change our names and our groups and confuse him a lot if he comes back. While we wait, I was just going to remind everyone that you may have received an email with a survey that we would like you all to complete before we set, I think, Thursday midday. So it's a very short survey on negative results and open access. And you should have received the link on your emails, but it's also included in the list for the talks on Friday. So if you go to our web page, there is a link there, so you can complete it while we wait for him or whenever you fancy. But it will be nice to have your contribution there.
Sorry about this. I had to jump out very quickly for an emergency, but I'm back. So Francisca, so don't worry about it. Your group was doing great. I know I was following it, so I am sure you will come up with a great piece of theater at the end. So let's move on to a next group. I would say group E. Funding committees is your stakeholders?
Yes. So we did the outline and write it down in the Word. So maybe I can share it.
Yes, that would be great.
Are you all guys? Can you see?
Yes.
And so my colleagues can help me. yeah, our disease, it's CLN7, which is a neurological disorder, and our stakeholders are funding committees. And so we discussed it, and we thought that in the status quo, we should start by describing the diseases and the symptoms, then move on to the negative impact on the patients and the family, tell about the existence of patients association, because this is a rare disease, and explain them that the consequences are devastating, and that the normal life, it's not possible for the children who suffers this disease. Then move on to negative impact on the society, which includes huge economic costs and high requirements regarding the healthcare, because children will need too much support, and the parents and their families also. Then I don't know if I can go just it's, I should continue.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, okay. So then we think that our problem is the fact that there is no treatment or cure for the disease, and there is a lack of funding to develop the therapeutic. This is what we need. Then our development strategy involves a gene therapy, a phase 1 trial, to be precise. The therapeutic name is AAV9, which is a single administration. And in this phase, we want to tell them that we will develop the vector, test the safety and the efficacy, and do all of this with different increasing doses. And then our solution is to improve the patient's and the family's life, decrease the healthcare costs, and increase the economic and generates jobs. The new status quo is less burden on economic and the patient's life.
Okay, so this is very nice, thank you, very good job. And let's not forget your stakeholders are the funding committees, so you're trying to convince them to give you funding, correct? Is that your...
Yes.
Now, one thing in your status quo was a little bit too generic for me. I would like to see more, more specifics. Who's your main character? Are you talking about a family? Are you talking about a father or a mother? Are you talking about a child, a doctor, a researcher? Who is living the problem? The main complication is impacting on the life of the child, on the life of the doctor, maybe, and so on. So your status quo is quite vague, and being vague, it makes it difficult to write the story afterwards.
Okay.
So the idea was quite good, but the execution was too vague for me. You need to be a little bit more specific. Okay, so the ingredients are there, but you need to be more specific.
Okay.
Great, wonderful. Let's listen to group D now.
Yeah. Okay. So we had the same disease of group E. So in our case, the stakeholder were the investors, we thought that these may be public or private investors that they want something in return from their investment, and we want from them both money, know-how, and technology supporting communication also. But also we want them to believe in what we are doing, and also make them understand that we really believe in what we are doing. And we think we also want from them, we want to build a relationship, sort of build trust for the future with these stakeholders. And we thought we could, let's say, we thought also about the possible themes and the impact about what we want to tell to these people is mainly on the pain of these children suffering from this disease, the quality of life they having, also the quality of life their parents, their family they're having, and also maybe they may feel abandoned because this is a rare disease, what we know, and so give them hope, basically, of a better life expectancy and a better quality of life. And our outline would be, so the status quo would be that we have these children with this disease without treatment, and parents that see that maybe they don't have hope, they may feel abandoned somehow. And the complication of this disease in this case is poor quality of life, both for patients and for the families, and eventually death for the children. In the development is divided, let's say, mainly in two parts. One is the clinical trials, of course, considering if we have already the preclinical data, as we understand from our case study. And then also the second part, so the clinical trials, so the scientific part of getting this drug in the different phases, but also communicating our research, and also having outreach of it, so make the people aware of what we are doing, so let people know that there is something going on. The solution of this would be having this new drug in our hands to give to the people, and then the transformation and the new status quo would be that so not only we have new therapy, but we have a transformation for the patients and the families, so having hope, better quality of life. And then for the stakeholder, the transformation would be, in this case, having in return a better image of themselves, more than money, so a better status in their hands.
Yeah, so thank you, Simone. Also, you did also a very, very good job. I would suggest for you as well to try to be as specific as possible. It was a little bit generic. Now, you should understand that when we do storytelling, we want to be we want to go to the details of things, because the details are what allows us to remember concepts and ideas. If we stay too generic, if we stay too vague, more on the philosophical level and less on the concrete level, then we have a hard time remembering even the concepts that are being portrayed. So even in the outline, it's important to be a little bit more concrete. All right, I tell you this, but it's true for everybody, and it's true for me as well whenever I write my own outlines. Okay, so it sounds like you understand the process though, and that's very good. Let's move on to to group C, patients and parents of the patients. Who's going to be the spokesperson?
Okay. I will speak about this. Just let me see only please a little, because I will try to share. Okay. How can I share this?
You should be able to share. I think you have the ability to.
Maybe it's... Are you seeing?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. We talk about the Machado Joseph disease, and it's we will communicate to patients. So maybe I don't have to do a synthesis of this, but we discussed and we decided to enroll patients with this disorder to a clinical trial. I don't know if you want that I explain the outline, or if I give you some aspects before, but maybe
just go ahead to the outline. We can take
Okay.
it from there, and then if we have questions, we come back.
Okay, so we identify the stakeholders, the teams, and then the outline. So the status quo. We identified as a guy or guys in his middle 30s with ataxia. Complication, he shows some symptoms. They only survive 10 to 20 years after symptoms first appear. In the development, we say that he meets a doctor, inform about the fact that there is a clinical trial. It's informed about the risks, but this might be beneficial. The solution, after talking to researcher and family, he understands that he might benefit from the therapy, so he decides to take part of the clinical trial. The new status quo we were discussing, it's not finished, but participation in the clinical trial, and also we were discussing about potential benefits that patients can have from this, as to find a new drug or a new treatment to ameliorate the disease, because a cure it's not possible here. So we need to discuss a little bit more this part when we are writing the story.
Yeah, but I mean, you did already very good job. You were quite specific with the details. A guy in his mid-30s. You're talking to patients, so you're doing this. What do you want to obtain with this story?
Yeah, we want to try to engage patients for the clinical trial. Okay. We are trying to recruit some patients with the Machado Joseph disease. The objective is that.
So you tell them this story to give them an example of what could be for them, what could happen to them.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. All right. Interesting. Okay. So it sounds good. So the new status quo is actually the moment that this guy is participating. So the life during the clinical trial. The important thing is that you understand what this guy has learned in the process. If the guy is your main character. If the center of your story is this person with the Machado Joseph disease, then what transformation has he gone through in the process? So the new status quo can be the participation in the clinical trial, but what has happened to him? In which way has he been transformed by the whole process? All right, if you can describe that, then you have a story. Because let's never forget that the story is about change. Whatever we write, there is a before and an after, and there is a transformation in there. So the story is like an engine of transformation, all right? So you are like an engineer. You engineer your engine of transformation. How do you like this? Just never thought about this, but now I am thinking about this. So see, I'm learning something.
Yeah, I took some notes, and we will discuss that and try to have a new status quo for the and try to find this.
Great. Thank you, Liliana. Wonderful. Great job. Let's move on now to group B. Group B, is there somebody from group B here?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I can start. So we are on the same disease, spinocerebellar ataxia, Machado-Joseph disease. And we are talking to general public. So our story, the outline, is also a guy in his, so we haven't written anything, so I'm not sharing, but it's also a guy in his mid-30s, between 30 and 40. He has the disease, and he has clinical signs. That's the statu quo. But the problem, the complication comes from the fact that it's a genetic disease, and his son is also diagnosed. So they do a genetic screen, and he finds out that his son will also have the disease. So his family is depressed, and they don't know what to do, and they look for solution. It's not so much for him, but mostly for his son in the future. And so they look for solution, and they found out that there's a clinical trial ongoing. And it's a bit scary because it's intrathecal administration, which means administration directly into the spine. So that sounds very dangerous. And also it's a placebo control. So it means that you might not even get the treatment. But anyway, he still decides to do it. And our new statue, so we decided to tell the story from his son point of view. So it's his son who talks in the future, who will tell the story about his dad being a participant into that clinical trial that eventually led to the approval of the drug that he now receives. And so the new status quo is that he doesn't have any symptom because his dad took part into a clinical trial to help future generations to test a new drug.
So this is very good because you used actually some key concepts. For instance, you use the concept of point of view. Who is telling the story? What point of view are you taking in the story? And because you said that you're taking the point of view of the kid, of the son, it's really good because it means that you already have a very clear picture about the story that you're going to tell. You can actually see what is important to tell, what is not. You're talking about a child being thankful to his father for the risks. You're talking about the love of a father that goes to the risks in order to protect his child, and so on. So there are a lot of ingredients in here. You also were quite specific in your description. So I think you already have essentially a lot of the story already there. I think it's good. It's good. And you have general public. What do you want to obtain from the general public?
Well, we thought we wanted to inform and educate them about clinical trials, and that the general, at the end, they are transformed by the knowledge that it's important to participate into clinical trials. eventually, even if it's not to save yourself, but to save future generations.
Right. Good. It seems to me you have very clear ideas. That's good. Wonderful. Thank you very much. Let's go to the last group, Group A.
So
let's hear what they have to say.
I would be presenting.
Chiara.
Yes. So our stakeholders were other scientists, and we decided that we want to obtain from them help and collaboration, basically. And these were also our teams. So our teams were, in fact, overcoming adversities and collaboration. Our outline is, so the status quo, we choose a Down syndrome in general as a disease we already knew or we thought we knew. The problem is that, of course, people now are growing old enough to develop Alzheimer later on. So this is our problem, basically. Our development is that we early test some drugs on cells, but now we need animal models, so we need help in this sense. The other development point was the improvement of framework for clinical diseases, and also the third one was helping patients. Our solution was basically ask the audience to help us, so ask other scientists to help us, and the new status quo would be a newborn collaboration, let me say. We were thinking to create a story based on scientists' point of view too. So like talking to scientists from a scientist point of view.
Okay, so yes, you have a real clear specific sort of target and very clear necessity that you are eliciting, this idea that people are getting older, and so you can make people with Down syndrome live longer, and therefore some new diseases are coming out that they would never come out before. So you have the tools there, so you have the ingredients there to create a really compelling story, because it's something we can all understand. And I tell you more, it can be also something that we can understand even if we don't really deal with Down syndrome, because this concept of the brain and problems with our cognitive functions in old age is something that we can deal. We can all feel, because we are all facing that. As you were talking, I was thinking that even if you don't have Down syndrome, since people tend to live longer, these cognitive issues are going to come out for everybody. I mean, if people live only until they're 60 years old, it's one thing. If they live until they're 90, it's a whole different ball game. So you have a very generic, very general topic there you can face. So I think it's good. I also invite you to be as specific as possible in your story now. Okay, don't leave it generic. You're not writing a research paper. You want to get emotional. You want people to get emotional about things, so that even if there are other scientists, they still can learn something about your topic. Before we go, let me tell you one thing that is also very important. You see, a lot of things come up as we talk. We as storytellers, as communicators, we are in a very beautiful spot, because we can open up new windows of understanding around the topics that we are talking about. We sort of are those people that have the opportunity to tell other people, whether they are general public or other scientists or stakeholders of all kinds, we can show them the importance, the impact, the beauty, and at the same time also the horror of what we are talking about. So it's something we really need to do with a lot of sense of responsibility, but at the same time with a lot of courage. When we do acting classes, when we do classes where physically we want to become storytellers in a physical sense, we do a lot of exercises on courage. It takes courage to talk about some things. It takes courage to tackle some issues. So here you have this opportunity. Make good use of it. Open up these windows of understanding for everybody, and everybody will be very thankful to you. So now Chiara told us about this idea of the old age and, you know, new diseases coming up because we live longer. It's somehow it's opening up a new understanding about our future, our existence. And we are all going to be thankful to you if you help us understand better about it. Does it make sense? See, there is a lot of philosophy in here, but, you know, that's how life goes. All right, so we have 1 hour. I know you're tired. Maybe you want to take a little break, but I suggest that we do this. We split back into rooms now until 4 o'clock, so half an hour. In this half an hour, you are more than welcome to take a few minutes break. You can decide among yourselves how long you need to take a break. But then I ask you to really come up with a story. Now, I know at the beginning I said 5 minutes, but 5 minutes is too long because there is no way we can hear all the stories. So make it shorter. Make it 3 minutes. Make sure it is 3 minutes and not 10 minutes, okay? Sometimes I say 3 minutes and it becomes 15 minutes. Make sure it's really short. Make it really sweet. Make it like one of those, you know, pint of science talks that you go see, you know, in situations where, you know, your thesis in 3 minutes, you know, there are competitions about this. And we meet back here again at 4 o'clock. At 4 o'clock, we are going to be listening to the stories, okay? And because I know Group F really wants to go first, again, Group F will go first. And Group A will go last, just like we did, all right?
No, that's
yes.
really unfair.
Oh, I know, but don't be so upset. You will be really great at this.
You trust him? I bet he's gonna do it the other way around when we connect.
Don't trust me too much. All right, so let's do this. So I hope everybody's back in the main room. And let's see if we can finally come to a conclusion by hearing some of your work. We have been running like crazy because time is quite you know, an issue here. But the point is, we are not looking for the great performance. We're only trying to understand the mechanisms of the stories. And by giving you very little time, actually, it improves the creativity. And so I know that you could use more time. I know that there are a lot of things that we could probably talk about. And in fact, now, as you will present your stories, or the embryos of your stories, or the ghosts of your stories, we can actually talk about some of the things that we haven't been able to mention during the day. So just bear with me. We still have 25 minutes before closing down today's session. And I would like to hear some of your stories. And because I am a man of honor, I said we would start with Group F. And in fact, as somebody mentioned before, I think it's gonna be Group A, because I know Group A is ready, and so you know, this gives the other groups more time to think about it, and also because Francisca from Group F seemed particularly concerned about going first, so I don't want to abuse on her patience. And let's start with Group A. Who's going to talk to us? Yes.
So I'm going to present for Group A. We have the perspective of the scientists, and we have Down syndrome, just as preliminary insights. So parents of children with Down syndrome in the recent decades valued researchers for extending the life expectancy of their offspring dramatically. So nowadays, people with Down syndrome can live way longer than we ever thought. But we know a lot about Down syndrome as scientists. We know a lot about Alzheimer, but we didn't know that there's a way higher risk in people with Down syndrome if they grow up and if they're adult, that they develop Alzheimer. So now we ask ourselves, like, how is this Alzheimer different or peculiar from the more conventional Alzheimer in normal patients? How does it affect people with Down syndrome differently than other patients? So we as scientists, we obviously want to help and want to increase our knowledge by merging knowledge. Therefore, we've made some high throughput drug screening and analysis, and we may think that we have found a drug that may alleviate some of the crucial burdens of the disease. But since until now we just did work in our cell cultures, we don't have the expertise to transport this into an animal model, not even talking about the clinical sphere. So therefore we need you, other scientists, to help us to increase our knowledge and the interdisciplinary insights for the electrophysiology, the biological, and the behavioral effects that those two syndromes have together. And these insights may be crucial to improve the therapeutic strategies for all of the patients, for the parents, and for the scientists. So therefore, we hope for collaboration from others and thereby increase the chance to early detect some of the diseases and help patients in the future. Thank you.
This is very good. Thank you. Very nice job. It's interesting. You were talking to other scientists, and this was clear. You developed an interesting look on the theme that you were on the topic that you were developing. That's very good. I have a couple of comments. One of them is that this was really not a story in the sense that I've been telling you. This was more like a sort of an abstract about introducing your general research topic, which is okay. You're talking to other researchers, so it's okay. But if you might have chosen to be more specific and talk about one specific case, name the person that you were talking about, so that we can relate to this situation in a more direct, visceral way. Right now it was more like describing your research topic and making us understand why your research topic is important, which is good. But you can actually move more into the storytelling and the story writing the way I was talking to you about. But your work actually gives me the chance to say that this idea of the hero's journey is quite helpful even when you're writing abstracts and when you're writing papers. And when you are presenting at conferences where you need to keep a high level of presentation, you cannot really get into more, the personal stories that I was talking about, because the ingredients are there. All right. So it's a very good example. Thank you, Group A. You did a great job. And now you raise the stakes for Group B that is feeling nervous because they want to be as good as Group A. Let's see what they have to say.
Hi, I'm Andrea also, and I would be reading the story of Group B because actually I don't know it by heart, so I'm just starting.
Yes.
Okay, so I would like to tell you the inspiring story of Joe Davis. He was suffering from Machado-Joseph disease, a genetic progressive cerebellar ataxia characterized by speech difficulties, uncontrolled muscle tensing, muscle stiffness, rigidity, double vision, without any hope of improvement. No cure, no help. Despite those symptoms, he was living a happy family life with 2 wonderful children, until he realized that his daughter was carrying the mutation. She was going to be affected when she'll be an adult. This had a tremendous impact on his life. While he bears living with his own disease, The idea of his little daughter being sick later was devastating. He started looking for solutions, all types of help, but no treatment was available. Some weeks later, while he was doing some research, he found out that he had the opportunity to be enrolled in a new clinical trial that was using a new technology delivered intrathecally directly to the spine. That was scary, especially because this was a placebo control, so he wasn't sure if he was going to receive the treatment. Despite all these risks and uncertainties, he decided to get involved, to take action, and every 8 weeks, he was at the hospital ready to receive his spine injection without any guarantee. Despite all difficulties, he was very proud of his decision because he knew that he was going to help someone someday. And here I am explaining the story of how my father took all the risks to help me be here explaining this today. And indeed, although he was receiving placebo, he deserves to be recognized today. And that's it. Thank you.
That's very good story. And you see, already we start to see the power of the specifics about a father, about a daughter. And I invite you to be even more specific. Give us the names. Tell us how, where they live. Tell us more details, because the more details you give us, the more attached we feel to them. All right? But it's a good story. So here you actually created a story, and I feel that I could actually connect with this, and it's a little TED talk that you gave us. So that's really good. Thank you, Group B. Wonderful. You see, we are doing really nice work, and we are now to Group C, talking to patients and parents of the patients.
Okay, I will talk again. We will talk about Machado Joseph and directed to patients. So John is a guy in his 35 years old. He's a bus driver, married with his high school love. His father died when he was a teenager at the age of 40s, more or less, in some unclear conditions. All in a sudden, one night he started to have sleep disorder, and later on he started to have other symptoms like double vision and coordination problems. He didn't give much importance to the symptoms, so he continued his life normally. One day he had a really bad accident for which he injured his leg. At the hospital, he got tested for many neurological diseases. However, the cause of his condition was not found. Later, he met a geneticist, which tested him for rare genetic diseases and diagnosed him with Machado Joseph disease. His life was turned upside down with the diagnosis, and he couldn't work anymore as bus driver. But worst of all was the fact that there is no cure, and his life expectancy dropped to 10-20 years. He got really depressed, and so he was advised by his wife to get involved in patient organization. He wanted to share his experience with other patients, but fortunately, he was offered to be part in a clinical trial that could open the possibility to discover a new drug to ameliorate his condition. He decided to enroll this clinical trial, and despite he was terrified about the outcome, he started to feel better and his symptoms started to be milder. He went back to the patient's organization, committed to inform other people of the good results obtained so far in the clinical trial and giving hope to other patients. And that's it. Yeah,
we were waiting to hear more about this guy. I mean,
yeah, we at the end the time was running out, and we shortened everything.
I hate when time runs out. I know. Okay. So this is also good. You see, you're. Well, how can I say? As long as you use the basic ingredients of the hero's journey. See, there is the status quo. The guy is having a normal life. He works as a bus driver. The complication. The guy has some problems with his vision and his coordination. The solutions that are quite different solutions, and then finally come to some new status quo which is the guy comes to terms with his disease and actually tries to help other people, then all these ingredients are in line, the story becomes engaging. All right? You don't need to think too hard. It's really the basic building blocks of any conversation that you might have to make it interesting. Sometimes, you know, if I write a grant for a project, you know, if I write a project for a grant, I will use the hero's journey to write it, because it really makes people interested in what you do. If I organize a conversation in some class or school or conference, I will use the hero's journey, and this is what you did. So very, very good example, and thank you very much for this. I'm happy because I can see that you have really taken in what I've been telling about today. So let's move on to Group D, talking to investors.
Well, so I'm going to talk about a disease called neuronal ceroid lipofuscinosis. That is an inherited disorder that mainly affects early childhood. It is considered a rare disorder that affects a nervous system and typically causes problems with vision, movement, and thinking ability. And moreover, patients do not survive past their teens. Nowadays, there is no cure or effective treatment for this disease, but however, we have been working with an AAV9-based gene therapy vector that is able to rescue the genetic expression of the protein affected. This therapy will improve quality of life of patients and families, and also life expectancy. Finally, a recent preclinical study has some positive results on the therapy, but we still need money to prove the efficacy of it. And that's all we have.
So you were so you were talking to investors. You were asking for money, right?
Yes.
So that's, I mean, you did ask for money at the end. That's good. But it's not really a story in the sense of what I've been trying to tell you today. It's more like a description of the issue of the problem that you have. All right.
Okay.
So you might want to think about how you can take this and translate it into a more engaging connection with the people listening to you.
Okay.
All right. So maybe you can be more concrete about a specific case. Or maybe you could actually write a story about yourself. If you are going to ask for money, tell them about your own problems.
Okay.
And say, look, you know, I wake up every morning, you know, I go to my job and I've been doing this, but now I don't even have money to buy the toner for the printer. So how do you expect me to, you know, do this work? And in the meantime, in, you know, I don't know, in China, they are, you know, funding universities with billions of dollars and so on and so forth. How do we overcome? We overcome it with my intelligence. You tell them, you know, I am so intelligent, but I can't get this work done. So you need to give me some money.
Okay.
So just create a story that is more than a description.
Okay.
All right? All right.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I know it's not easy. I know it's not easy. Thank you very much. Now let's move to Group E, funding committees. Who's doing Group E?
Teacher.
Nobody?
Should I present it? Okay.
I don't know.
Well, okay, we can go.
Did you agree on who should present?
No.
No. Beatrice, go. Beatrice, go.
Hey, I thought you guys could do it.
No, I don't.
Okay. So, I will begin. Our lab studies the inherited autosomal recessive CLN7 disease. During our project development, we work with parents' associations from patients with this disorder We met Joe, who suffers from this since 3 years old. Joe is now 5 years old and suffers of cognitive motor decline, ataxia, epilepsy, and loss of vision. Joe's treatment has a high economic cost to the health system and to the family. There is no treatment or cure, and the last chance for Joe is to engage into our phase 1 clinical trial, aimed to develop a gene therapy. Since this is a very rare disease, there is no other way for us to get money. So our solution is to apply to the clinical vector AAV9, test it positively in preclinical assays. Now we need to test the safety and efficacy in order to improve Joe and family's life. The potential benefits will include decreased cost of healthcare and create high quality jobs and economic improvements. And with your help, the funding committee, you can save and improve Joe lives and family also. And also you can save money from the health system. And with this, we can apply this gene therapy to other genetic disorders. That's it.
Okay, it's interesting because you sort of gave a pitch, and the pitch was constructed as in we are doing this, but then you make a relation with Joe, who's 5 years old, and so we kind of would like to know more about Joe. My suggestion in this case is that you really create more of an empathetic connection with this kid, for us, to give us more details about the kid and less details about the issues and the problems. You could actually tell us more about Joe and what the problems are and how Joe is, is living, and then at the end say, hey, in order for us to really make a difference in Joe's life, we need funding, or so that it becomes more of a story and less of a presentation of the issue. So for you as well, it's moving more towards the specific situation and of the story, creating this narrative, which is a little bit missing right now. But you came really close to it with Joe. You see, if instead of Joe you had said, hey, for our patients and this and that, then it would be even further away, and then I would say absolutely connect with a more specific case. But here you talked about Joe, so you already did connect. You can connect more. Does it make sense?
Yes, but we thought that our stakeholders are not too interested in the patient's life.
They probably are interested in the patient's life if you make a difference in the patients, because they want to know more about the patients, I think. Of course, every stakeholder is different, but they want to know more about the patients, and then you tell them, look, but we need money in order to take care of these patients. So yes, I think you can talk about the patients in more details.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, final Group F. I know you were waiting for this. It was, the moment that Francisca and her group. Yeah, who's delivering the story here?
It's me, I suppose.
Yeah.
But it's not finished.
Oh, come on,
so
don't worry.
I think I will be improvising from one paragraph to the other.
We like improvisation.
Eventually you will realize it, but okay. So sorry about whatever comes next.
Okay. So I'm sorry, Francisca, we're talking to students, right?
Students, and we want them to eventually want to work in Down syndrome.
Okay, great. Let's hear this.
So, lately I've been working on a review paper on Down syndrome. a topic that has been the focus of my own research over the last 20 years. I kind of hope that this paper will help me get the interest of some students and get them to work with me. But eventually, what it came by doing an historical revision of the whole story on Down syndrome, I came to think about actually the butterfly effect and how you never know how a single moment may change your entire life and the ones of everyone around you. And I came to think about this because of the life of Langdon Down. Langdon Down was born in 1928 in a little British working class village. His family lived among the artisans who worked in the naval base and took him out of school when he was 14 years old. Yet, when he was 18, he had what might be described as a mystical experience. A heavy summer shower drove the family to take shelter in a cottage, and there he saw a girl with a visible mental retardation and had this huge necessity to just do something for her. And these were his own words. The remembrance of what happened, that girl presented itself to me, and I longed to do something for her whole kind. And so he just changed his whole life. He got himself a medical degree and basically devoted his entire career to patients who resembled that girl. He found them, he worked with them, and tried to make a difference in their lives. He was the first doctor to give a whole description of that disease, which was then called as the Mongolian type of idiocy. I mean, patients, they were step aside the whole society. There was not even a proper name for the disorder. And eventually the disorder was named after him. He realized that it was a congenital disease and it resulted from accidents after uterine life. He said they are for the most part instances of degeneracy arising from tuberculosis in the parents. His description covered most important features of Down syndrome, and it was the first scientific report on the disorder who promoted its recognition. Later, both his son and his daughter also devoted their lives to Down syndrome study and to the support of the patients. And you may never imagine, but his grandson, in the end, turned out to have Down syndrome. And now we are in 2021, and as I head to the university, I sit on the last car on the train. It's the only solo seat. It's usually the place no one wants, but as it has always been my place. And take it from me, it's not that I'm a loner, I'm a watcher. And I think I may have just seen one of those rare moments where a single encounter, smallest kind of kindness, may change someone's life forever. Right in front of me sits one of the girls who's finishing her graduate course on my class. I'm not even sure she saw me, focused as she was on her cell phone. And yet, I know she did notice the Down syndrome girl who so generously picked up her books when she ran to the door in a rush. And believe me, I am quite sure the look in her eyes when she faced that patient was exactly the same that Langdon Down had when he first faced the girl who made him choose medicine and changed his whole life.
Wow, you wrote a lot of stuff in such a short time. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for sharing it with us. Very interesting. So yeah, so this is a story, absolutely. And you connected your own life, the life of Down, the Dr. Down, and the life of other people in one, story that only lasted a few minutes, but it actually was quite complete. So I think you had all the ingredients in there, the status quo, the complication to overcome, the complication for Dr. Down, but also the complication for you and for the person in the train. and you did what we call in playwriting, we talk about this entanglement of situations, and you came really close to that, so that's quite a good example, but it's a little bit too far for us, you know, to be talking about right now. So thank you very much. It was a great ending to the day. I know you have to go, but maybe we still have a couple of minutes to steal from your day for questions, if you have any questions or any comments that you might want to make, or maybe some closing remarks from Michela.
I don't know if anybody has questions.
Was it difficult?
Horrible.
Was it? It was horrible. No, don't say that. That's a terrible thing.
Because it's too short. The time is too short. Sorry. But it was really nice.
Okay,
I mean,
okay.
sorry.
Francisca, you did great, eh? Much better than what we had written down.
Yeah. So listen, I will do this. I will give my slides to the organization so that they can share them with you. And of course, I will be more than happy to answer or keep the conversation going. You can find me on the email that you will see on the slide. So you are welcome to write to me. And also, hopefully, I will see you online in some of our events. As I said, we are starting up with the Theater of Wonder, the Teatro della Meraviglia. So go look it up if you want. On the 13th of May, we will start the programming. It's going to be online. And so that will be another opportunity for you to connect with science theater and science communication. And a special invite to Michela, because I know hopefully next year she will be able to also be part of it.
I really hope.
Yes, so you are, please go ahead, and if you have the time and the energy, because I know running a school like this and then also finding time is difficult.
I will on Thursday, right? Yuri Bodzi is giving his augmented lecture, so I will definitely look at that.
Yes, absolutely. And also on Friday there is going to be a lecture from Bulgaria in English. Yuri Bodzi will be in Italian, but we have subtitles. And so you're more than welcome to go look it up. And thank you for, I see some comments here. I'm very happy that, you know, the workshop hopefully was appreciated. And I try to give you as much of the things that I do and the things that I love as possible.
Thank you,
So
Andrea.
once again, thank you and have a great week.
Thank you, Andrea. It was really nice.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you for the workshop. Bye.
See you all tomorrow.
Bye. Thank you.